Long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a doof media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series and beyond. I am your host, Constant Reader Scott Daly, and joining me as always, saying his name gives me power over him, it's Matt Freeman. Haha. Go back to the shadow.
That's why we always begin the episode with you saying my name, because that's how
true.
you compel me to do the episode, actually.
Exactly. I'm glad you've discovered this here on the third to last episode, because now my power over you will start to wane. Yeah, I mean, I could just toss to you to introduce yourself, but no, I like it better this way. So This is the way we're doing it.
You say my name. It's a move of dominance is what it is.
It is. This week on the show, we reach the end of Fairy Tale as we read chapters 29 all the way through the epilogue of the novel. Charlie and Leia delve deep into the castle and eventually the deep well itself to confront Eldon, the flight killer, and Gog Magog himself. They are victorious, though Charlie is hurt in the fight, and Charlie and Radar, alive, eventually return home to be reunited with his alive father. They close off the well to Empus forever and live happily ever after. That's the end of the book. Matt, what did you think of this week's reading?
All these people are alive.
I can't believe it.
I mean, we lose a couple people.
Yeah, but I mean, let's be honest here. I'm not going to lose sleep over him.
I am not going to lose sleep over. I'm not going to lose one iota of sleep over them.
The jokes.
This is a great ending. I enjoyed this book. We might sort of bracket our okay, so next week we're going to do our book overview, right? That's what we always do.
Correct.
This week we're just talking about this ending. And I think that's going to be a fun conversation. This is also going to be a fun conversation, obviously. I think I can't decide if we were more wrong than we were right about the direction that the book was going. I definitely feel like I called some shots that just did not happen.
Sure.
But don't feel too bad about that, I guess.
I mean, I would say I think we overcomplicated what we thought the book was going to do. And I think at the end of the day, this is a book that is titled Fairy Tale, and this is the book that operates on fairy tale logic and story structure. And so a lot of the stuff we talked about, I think the book ended up doing. It just did not end up doing in a way that is as complicated as we said it was going to, right? I think that's a fair way of giving us credit without giving us too much credit.
Sure, I'll take that.
Yeah, I mean, I for my part, I sometimes I keep forgetting that it's important for me to say how I'm liking the book too, because this is a one that I haven't read. I enjoyed the ending of this book. I did. I thought the emotional highs really got to me. The lows really got to me. There's some questions I have on some of the specific elements emotionally about parts of the ending that I think we'll get into when we get into the details. But overall, very satisfied with this ending, very satisfied with this book, really enjoyed it. And I predicted this, right? I called this from the very beginning. I told everyone out there, if you're expecting me to read this book and explain to you why it's bad, you're probably going to be disappointed because I was just kind of on the wavelength of this book from the very, very beginning. And I remained on that wavelength all the way up into the last page. Very emotional moment for me. I took a screenshot as I opened to the epilogue and ended up posting it on our Instagram, because this was it, Matt. This was the last book we're reading for this show. We're going to read more books. We're going to do more podcasts, but this was the last one. This is the last normal episode of Kingslingers right here, because we'll have our overview episode and then our finale after that. But a lot of emotions right now, and I think it got me into the mindset of the emotionality of this ending, and I dug it.
Yeah, I like that. That makes sense.
Yeah. All right. Before we get into the episode proper, we did have a couple quick announcements. The finale, Matt, it's just a time for finales, I guess. Everything's coming to an end. But the finale of our bonus podcast, Castle Talk, is live now on Patreon. We discussed the last two episodes of season 2 of the Hulu original series, Castle Rock. Mixed bag, I think, is the metaphor we used. And I think it remains true. A lot of fun discussing that show with you. If you haven't checked it out yet, all 20 or 10 episodes are live now on our Patreon for our $10 and up listeners. So check that out. We also announced at the end of that show something I think we had already said on here. We will be covering the television show From as a bonus podcast on our Patreon from here on out. So we're going to begin that next month and continue that for as long as we need to get through that show. So it's still a great time. I know it feels like it's a weird time because Kingslingers is coming to an end, but we're not stopping podcasting. We're not stopping the bonus content. There's still a great reason to be a patron. So head on over to patreon.com/JoofMedia and join now to hear us talk about Castle Rock.
Yeah, you can hear that episode. You can go hear the all of our backlog of episodes discussing the TV show Castle Rock, which, I had a lot of fun watching that with you. The final episode might have been a mixed bag, but overall, I enjoyed both of those seasons of TV. We had our nitpicks and gripes here and there, but
yeah,
I recommend that show, and I recommend people listen to us talk about it.
Yes, please do. All right, one more quick announcement, Matt. You want to take this one? We who are you gonna call? Is the name of this announcement?
Yeah. So, we did this previously. I believe that at the end of season 1, was it?
Both of them, season 1 and season 2.
Season 1 and season 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a phone number to call, and you can call and leave a message, and in that message, just leave your thoughts, feelings, reactions. I think what we said last time is try to keep it to under a minute, I think is what we said.
We did.
If it goes too long, it will simply not be captured by the voicemail. So please keep it reasonable. We and then once you leave those messages, assuming everything goes well and the audio quality is good, then we try to splice those into the final episode.
Yeah, it's always just been a fun way of kind of, turning the tables and hearing from you folks via audio instead of us all this time. We spend 99% of our episodes us talking into the microphones, and it's fun to hear other people talk at us. So this is a really fun thing we've always done. And yeah, I think in the past we've said, just talk about, what Stephen King means to you, what these books mean to you. I think we're going to allow, Matt, as uncomfortable as it makes me, because this show is coming to an end, we're going to allow people, if they want to, because they were going to do it anyway, to talk about us. Maybe we'll let you do it. I believe me, I feel so weird in my body just saying that right now. Like I am visibly uncomfortable. But I know people are going to do it anyway, so I figure you might as well just say, yes, you are allowed to talk about us and talk about the show and what you've enjoyed most about it. So yeah, go for it. Have some fun with this. I think the other thing we have to say before Matt gives this number, this will only work in the United States, I believe, is the stipulation that has existed in the past. I'm 90% sure that will still be the same. So if you do not live in the United States, but you want to send a voice message to us, you can do it the old-fashioned way, which is just record yourself talking into a microphone and sending us the audio file via email to kingslingerspod@gmail.com. So that is the way if you live internationally. But if you live in the U.S. and just want to pick up your phone and dial a number and leave us a voicemail, Matt, what is that number that they can dial?
The phone number is 719-357-5132. That's 719-357-5132.
We will also put that in the show notes.
Yeah, right.
So you got 2 weeks. Kids, to get those voice messages in. We will cut those together and have a nice little emotional send off for the show on our final episode. So get to dialing.
Yeah,
I guess.
Get yapping.
That's what the kids say these days.
I know.
Yapping. Do your kids say yapping?
They don't yet.
That's good.
Yeah.
What was it your daughter called something mid the other day?
She called my seafood gumbo mid.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you don't have a daughter anymore. It's really sad.
Yeah. That's unfortunate.
All right, let's get into the episode, Matt. We begin this week with chapter 29, titled "The Lift, the Spiral Staircase." Jeff, the Lord High, the Queen of Empus, will do her duty. Jeff, Matt, Jeff.
Jeff. He gets his own entry in the chapter heading.
Yeah. This week begins with our quartet finishing winding and boarding the lift that will take them high, high, high up into the central tower of the castle. They have to squeeze onto this lift, which barely fits all of them and results in several of them almost falling to their deaths several times. Matt, we're jumping ahead here, but I do love the reveal that this was essentially entirely unnecessary, and Leia knew another way into the castle, but she was afraid if she went that way, she would run into Eldon and his retinue before they had gotten down there, and just didn't want to deal with that. So she says, we're going to go this way, and it's scary, and they almost die. Ha ha! Fun.
Yeah. Another fun thing I discovered in this section of the book is that apparently if I just vividly imagine what it would be like to be on a crowded elevator platform with no sides going up into the sky, that's enough to actually kind of freak me out a little bit. I don't particularly think of myself as having a fear of heights, but like apparently I have enough of a fear of heights that just imagining that specific combination of elements made me kind of have the like feeling of vertigo of like, even though you're sitting in a chair. So I thought that was fun.
Yeah, I think King does a really, really good job of describing this, because I agree with you. Like I got a very clear visual sense of what it's like to be in this incredibly overcrowded platform. People are freaking out. There's a dog in the middle that's also freaking out. And I think the detail, like Leia's straddling the dog in the middle of the platform, and like it's just a very, very clear image as they slowly go up. And there's that one moment when the lift like stops momentarily for seemingly no reason. I think literally just King did that just to ratchet up tension a little bit more. It's a really great moment and altogether unnecessary in the end.
Yeah. Well, it worked on me.
Yeah, me too. So as they go up, the kind of the evil of the castle continues to hound them. We see here that there are voices. It says, the voices whispered and twined. One I heard clearly said, your father's brain is eating itself. These voices are mean as hell, man. Like I really at this point was feeling like super extremely confident about our dad is totally dead thing. Like I hear these voices, and it's not like the last time the voices are going to attack Charlie specifically at his father. And I was like, oh man, this is dead dad. Here we go, dead dad. But of course, Matt, we know now that is not what happens.
Man, it seemed like such a slam dunk that we were going to have dead dad, and
it did.
Like, I think this is what happened, and maybe this is a little bit of justification, but so Charlie is a kid who lost a parent. He has a tremendous level of anxiety about the idea of losing his dad, connected with that. And then he has a bunch of other anxiety piled on around his dad's alcoholism. So basically, there's plenty of in-story character-based justification for Charlie to constantly be thinking about his dad, worrying about his dad, having foreboding thoughts about what might happen to his dad. And, we misinterpreted all of this stuff as the book foreshadowing that something horrible was going to happen to his dad. When really that's just kind of what Charlie's thinking. I will say there were a few moments in the book where I can think of no other interpretation than this is supposed to imply that he never sees his dad again. Almost makes me feel like King changed his mind about this or something.
And maybe he did, right? Maybe he did. Like, I think that's one thing that King would definitely do as he's going further along with his book. And I mean, that is one of the central things I do want to talk to you. And maybe that's a better conversation for the overview, or just maybe a better conversation for the very, very end of this week's reading. But it does seem like we were set up and made to have an expectation that the ending of this novel was going to be horrifying, awful, and something that Charlie can't bring himself to talk about. That he's like, the process of writing the book is almost him gathering his strength to be able to talk about and relive this thing. I think similar to what happened in Doomickey, where that story was seemingly about our character kind of mentally preparing to revisit the death of his daughter. And so it just seemed like the ending of this book was going to have something that was very dark, something that Charlie felt personally responsible for. And it's not that isn't true. It's just not as dark and awful as it seemed like the book was setting itself up to do. And I really want to examine that with you when we get there, because I think that's a really interesting thing that ends up happening. And I'm not sure it's clear to me on why the book did that.
Yeah, I agree. Let's talk about that next time. Yeah.
So after almost coming to an early stop, the platform finally reaches the top of the spire. The group goes along a walkway as the wind howls at them, and they end up at a spiral staircase lined with that creepy green glass with the Cthulhu tentacles in it. You know, Matt, I gotta say, when Leia at the end of last chapter said you have to go up to go down, I kind of figured she was speaking metaphorically and not just, well, the spiral staircase down, the entrance is up. Like, I really thought this was a metaphor, and it's not. It's just a literal thing that happens. But I mean, let's still attack the metaphor, right? Because I think there is still a metaphor here, even though the book is just doing the literal interpretation as well.
Yeah, there's a couple things I wanted to say about this. So one is like, because it's a fairy tale, it's kind of like, fairy tales are interesting because fairy tales are full of weird stuff where it's like, okay, so metaphors are just the way things work, you could say. Like the beanstalk in Jack and the Beanstalk kind of is a metaphor for an uncanny bridge to an unreachably distant world, but it's kind of also just a beanstalk. and it's also unclear to me what the beanstalk is a metaphor for in a more grounded sense in Jack and the Beanstalk. So I'm mentioning Jack and the Beanstalk because that's, obviously relevant to this story. And sure. also frankly, the idea of Jack's Beanstalk seems to me, in my mind, connected to this idea of like, you must go up to go down. It's about a connection between worlds that happens to be vertical, which is also related to obviously the Well of the Worlds that he uses to enter the story. I don't know. So to go down, you must go up. There's a few different ways that you can take that, but I don't know that I find any of them to be super like obvious. Do you have like a fantastic explanation for this in your hip pocket?
No, I mean, I think that like this is, I guess, kind of a overarching metaphor of Charlie's journey through the book, perhaps, is like this idea that he's this really interesting character who has these dark and light sides to him, clearly, right? And he has to kind of collectively channel both the dark and light sides in order to fulfill his potential as this promised prince. So this idea that like, I don't know, you have to ascend before you can to another level before you can allow yourself to sink to a lower level. I'm really not sure.
Yeah. So what I mean when I say none of it seems too obvious is maybe what I should have said is none of it seems too clear, because it's like, yeah, kind of what you just said. It's like he elevates by becoming Prince Charlie. And then after sort of summoning the power of Empus into himself and becoming Prince Charlie, only then is he able to face the evil with that full gathered power around him. But even as I say that, I'm kind of like, okay, but also he had to go down to go up, right? He had to go down into the bowels of the castle and be tortured, so that he could like gather this sense of nobility, and he had to touch this darkness. So like, it's like he had to touch the darkness in himself to actually summon the goodness, to summon to like you almost, I don't know if this is textual, but you get the sense that he maybe he couldn't even turn into Prince Charlie, the sort of divine being, if he hadn't gone through the hell of Deep Maleen. I don't know if that's true, but that really complicates this, right? the metaphor for me.
Yeah, well, certainly, because also to get to Empus, he needs to go down, right? Like he has to go down in Empus, and being an Empus is part of this journey for him. So yeah, I mean, it almost would make sense that you have to go down to go up. I think like we're probably just thinking about this too much, and just like this is just King having fun with kind of this contradiction of ideas in the vertical ascendance and descendance that has happening to all characters in across this novel. Like it happens to Eldon, I think Leia as well, Charlie, like are all going through this fundamental change, and the vertical ascendance and descendants are like part of this process. So I think it's just that. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right that it is fun that like King is living in this world of fairy, and he's just making all these metaphorical things just literal. And it was just surprising to me that it was just like, oh, I really thought there was going to be something like as the elevator rose, we were going to do some sort of weird threshold crossing, and we would find ourselves deep below the castle despite traveling upwards, and that would have been a lot more mystical and magical. And now it's just like there's a staircase up here, so just gonna take the staircase. It's like, oh, okay, sure.
Yeah. On that note, I did think it was also interesting that, you know, the door from Earth to Empus is kind of just like a hole in the ground in the woods.
Yeah.
Which obviously he built the shed around. But the door from Empus to Hell, or, you know, whatever, I forget the word for this other world.
I don't think they ever actually name it, but Hell works.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's in the castle, right? Like, or it's under the castle. And I'm like, did they build around it? I don't remember if we know the answer to this. I just thought it was interesting how it's like quite different, actually.
I kind of like the idea that they built the castle around this threshold in the same way that Bowditch built the shed around his. That like this is a thing that they found and they built this castle around it. I mean, it says something very interesting about this world. Like, why does this world have this connection to this deep, deep, dark terribleness? Like maybe this is a kind of a interesting exploration of the rot underneath this place, this magical place. Clearly was not perfect, right? It is clearly a place of deep darkness, and even before Gog Magog came here, things weren't perfect. There was cruelty, there was misery, there was all the things you would normally see in any kind of place. And perhaps this deep well in the center of it is a symbol of the rot at the core of this place. I don't know. Because I mean, like they seal it off, right? And it's not like we don't kill Gog Magog. We cannot kill that type of fundamental evil. We've sealed it off for now, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Like I think Charlie even says when he dismisses him, like, you may come back in 10 years and 10,000 or 100,000, but not today, right? It's like, yeah, this evil will return at some point. But I don't know. I like the idea, the headcanon of that the castle was built around this place.
Cool.
All right, they begin to make their way down this long, spooky staircase, and Charlie eventually realizes that it empties out into all the other rooms around the castle, and he realizes he's got a couple things left he has to do still. He's still got a bone to pick with Kellen.
Uh-huh.
I'm so good at this. Oh my God, 4 years later, I'm just nailing it.
Yeah.
When it comes time to actually search out Kellen, though, the Snab magically returns to do the guiding. So the Snab like shows up at various points this week to kind of just show up and be like, here, let me help you. I'm going to help you here, and I'm going to disappear again, and I'll help you again. Just kind of magically appears and disappears as the story needs it to.
It's kind of interesting that the Snab seems to have like a vendetta against like Kellen in particular, and just in general. Like, it's interesting that the Snab seems to have an agenda, right? Like, yeah, it never really talks. Or I don't think it talks. That does it?
I mean, it talks through other people. Like for whatever reason, Charlie is not attuned to the mental wavelength of the Snab, so he cannot talk to it. I think there is a moment where it talks through Jaya, though.
Yeah.
So it does talk. I don't know. I didn't see this as the Snab's personal agenda, but rather the Snab is just like feels like it is indebted to Charlie and is going to help him accomplish his mission. but we can certainly get into that when we see exactly how the Snab helps defeat Kellen, because Jesus.
Okay, yeah.
Before they go into the room, though, Iota asks for permission to be the one who takes care of Kellen. Charlie allows this, and then we get the classic King move, Matt. I'd take it back if I could and use the 45, but I didn't know. The Snab didn't either, or it surely would have told Jaya. Thinking of that helps, but not enough. In the whole history of the world, all the worlds, not knowing never changed a single mistake. Well,
sigh.
I think I literally said out loud, well, he's dead.
Yeah.
And of course he is. So they get to the chambers and meet Jeff, who slashes Iota, giving him a shallow cut on a shin before he's taken down and subsequently executed by Leia. Jeff, Matt, his name is Jeff. Just it's fucking Jeff.
In the fantasy world, his name's Jeff.
Or Geoff.
Yeah, we never really know.
I mean, in the book, in the writing of the book, it said Jeff, but it makes the joke is like, I don't know, maybe he spells it the other way. How did, like, when they did that in audiobook, did he just say Jeff twice?
No, I think he said the spelling out loud. I think he said Geoff.
Okay. I think I hate that spelling, but I just want that note. Apologies to all the Geoffs out there.
Sorry to all the Jeffs who were listening to this last episode. Like, I had no idea that they were going to just be complete assholes here.
Sitting down in my car, ready to drive to work and listen to my buds, Scott and Matt. And then they tell me my name sucks. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, Jeff. You should talk to your parents about that.
No, Jeff. It's really more just that it's an unusual name for a fantasy goon, which I almost think it's. You kind of made fun of this earlier, how one of the night guards was named like Aaron.
Aaron, yes.
And it's like, there's a. I don't know. I don't have a point with this, but like it's interesting how so much of this book actually is concerned with the fact that Charlie's not actually speaking. Or rather, they're not actually speaking English. Charlie is hearing them as if they're speaking English. And then when he speaks, he's not really speaking English. It's coming out different. And then here we have this element that their names are stuff like Jeff. And it just kind of makes me wonder if this guy's name isn't Gargamel and and he's just hearing it as Jeff because why? Who knows? But, and again, do I think that's the case? Not necessarily. It's just kind of a funny quirk of the book that particularly these undead soldiers have like just weirdly normal names.
Yeah. I mean, sure. Like I think it's just for fun.
Yeah.
Like I think he's doing this intentionally and just having fun with it. Like you can kind of tell when King's being a little cheeky. Like putting Jeff in the title of the chapter, like is definitely part of him being a little cheeky with this. So I'm for it.
Now that you say that, it totally does seem like, because he's got his little whimsical sense of humor where he'll just make something wacky and kind of corny because it amuses him. And there's no, that is what this is. You're right.
Yeah. So then, as they confront Kellen asleep in his bed and are about to throw a pail of water on him, the Snab shows up again and summons a swarm of rats to absolutely consume him. Matt, I want to talk about this because obviously they could have just thrown some water on him. He would have exploded. That might have been dangerous. So maybe the Snab is just looking out for our team by not having explosive electric skeletons near them. But he summons thousands of rats to just absolutely consume him. And this is the second time this has happened, right? First it was butterflies and then rats. Like, why do you think, like, getting back to the imagery of it and what the message we're trying to share here, why do you think we're killing the night soldiers in this kind of way?
So what's interesting is I didn't have a thought about this at all. And then I forced myself to ask the question and I realized, like, well, there's this specific thing with the night soldiers where they are oath breakers.
Yes.
They were tasked with defending the land and they betrayed their oath. This is one of the first things that comes out of Charlie's mouth when he's sort of like in Prince Charlie mode. He calls them Oathbreakers, and he doesn't even really know what that means. So this is something that's important to the cosmology, the way this land works. It's important that these guys are Oathbreakers. And so I think maybe the Snab, as a kind of a representative of Empus, is taking vengeance upon these Oathbreakers.
I really like that. I asked this question without an answer, as I often do. But I think that works for me. I really enjoy that. I think you're right.
And it looks cool.
Yeah, well, that's true. Like just thousands of rats. I didn't share you the picture of the opening of this scene, but the picture that opens this chapter is Kellen in his bed being swarmed by rats. And it's like fucking crazy.
Yeah, it's mellow.
It's awesome. It's awesome.
Cool.
Unfortunately, though, Matt, the blade that nicked Iota was poisoned, and our old friend succumbs to this poison rather quickly. I know we had to kind of whittle down the numbers of the Kated until only Leia and Charlie remained. Like, I kind of figured that was going to be the way it was going to go, that like when we get to the final confrontation with the flight killer, like it's going to just be Charlie and Leia. But I didn't expect characters to die in this kind of way, and so this one kind of got to me a little bit. I guess you could say he couldn't take 1 iota of poison.
Yes, we're gonna keep doing it.
We're not gonna stop. I'm gonna be honest with you. I wrote the joke in my script before you made the joke at the beginning of the show, and I'm like, fuck, now we're gonna have to do it twice. So I thought about just not doing it, and then I said, no, I'm sticking with it.
Things are more funny when you do them over and over and pound them into the ground.
I read that somewhere, actually.
There's a limit. It's a U-shaped curve. Yeah, I mean, Iota was one of, I think we talked about this before. There were like 2 characters from Deep Maline that I actually gave a crap about. Hamey and Iota, and not at all surprised to see him die here. It seemed like so the thing about Iota, I almost last week made the comparison between this band of heroes and the group of bikers who helps Jack toward the end of Black House.
Oh, interesting.
And now I wish I had said that, because then I would get to take credit for making the connection of somebody dying of poison.
Oh yeah. Huh. I didn't think of that at all. That's great.
Yeah, it's pretty. I mean, it's kind of a stretch, but also it's like I think there's something very moving about the idea that one of your friends who has fought by your side is now dying, like slowly and horribly in front of you, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's just kind of an inherently dramatic idea, so that's probably why it cropped up a couple times like this.
Sure. Yeah, no, I like that. And yeah, I mean, it is, I think this is part of the case that the book is building for why Charlie feels so negative about the end of the story, right? Is because these people are dying for him. This is not the first person that's died sacrificing his life for the sake of Charlie's mission. And it's not going to be the last either. So it's just like, you can kind of maybe start to get why Charlie looks back on this experience with so much regret and negativity.
Yeah, that's true.
So before he dies, I asks Leia for one thing to do her duty. And our chapter actually closes, Matt, with Leia promising to do that, but speaking ventriloquism through I. Jesus Christ.
It's pretty dark, yeah.
Yeah. But I did really love this moment. I think this is, it's not as if this moment is what makes Leia decide to eventually stab her brother, but I do think this is like one step towards that journey, right? Like this was a necessary thing that needed to happen to get her eventually to the place where she does indeed do the right thing.
Yeah, I think you're right.
All right, Matt. So let's go on to chapter 30, our climactic chapter of the book. This chapter is titled One More Stop, The Dungeon, Resolute, Impossible Stars, The Dark Well, Gog Magog, The Bite. of just like I really love when, like, I know we talked about this already, but I just continue to really love when King titles chapters this way, because you go through these things and you're like, ooh, 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 and then like to end on the bite, you're just like, what does that mean?
Yeah, you start making up things in your mind immediately.
Yep. And Matt, I just want to say that last week I predicted that the moons were going to smash into each other, and you said, no way, that's not going to happen. And then I turned the page in my copy of the book to this week's chapter, and I saw the picture accompanying the chapter title was a picture of a little moon smashing into a big moon, and I got to out loud, sitting in my chair, say, "Ha, idiot."
Yeah, that was kind of mine to lose, wasn't it? Look, in my defense, I read Neil Stephenson's Seven Eves a few years ago, and there's a very vivid impression in my mind that when the moon explodes, that's really bad for the people on the planet.
Uh-huh.
And I was centrally thinking, like, I don't think this book is going to end with the destruction of Impus, which is correct. But my problem was in not realizing that the moons could explode and that would be totally fine. And everybody would be totally fine.
You forgot you were in a fairy tale, and now it's just like a magical dust trail of moon remainings.
Yeah. And it just stays up there somehow.
Matt, it's a freaking magical world. Okay? There's a fucking talking cricket.
Yeah. Okay.
I just, like, in the world where there's a talking cricket that just summons a horde of rats to consume a electrical skeleton, you're sitting here like, wow, if the moons were destroyed, they would have thrown off the tidal forces of the planet and everyone would have died, actually.
Yeah. It struck the two moons, creating two distinctly different notes.
Yeah, you're the worst. I'm canceling this show.
Okay. It's time.
So Charlie informs Leia that he still has one more thing he has to do before they go down to the deep well and their confrontation with her brother. She was fairly resistant, Matt, to the first time that Charlie wanted to kind of take a detour. But I think this time the event with Iota has left her a bit shell-shocked, and she just kind of acquiesces to exactly what he wants here. What did you think about this beat?
Yeah, I think Charlie has been surrounded by death and horror for the last several months, but Leia has been happily farming ducks and stuff for all that time.
Mm-hmm.
And she kind of needs to be shocked into actually viscerally understanding the stakes. So I agree that, like, narratively speaking, shocking her into getting with the program is what we're doing here.
Yeah, and I love how King, like, draws this. Like, she made no protest, only gave a wary nod. There was still a curd of bloody foam on her cheek. I reached out to wipe it away, and this time she didn't shrink back. Like, that's like a great depiction of the shell shock, right? It doesn't have to say she's still recovering emotionally from this horrible death she witnessed of Iota, who on his deathbed said, hey, do your duty. Like, it just says, oh, she's still got a little bloody curd on her cheek, and it's telling us everything we need to know.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so the place that Charlie wants to go is, of course, the torture chamber, where he's hoping to see Percival. He does find him here, left in a lump on the floor of the chamber, his hand cut off, but he's still alive. Matt, I really love this moment where not only does Charlie bow to him, but Leia goes over to Percy and gives him a big hug as well. I think there's this really interesting thing going on with Leia here that I think is really important, because King has kind of set her up as a potential antagonist to Charlie at the end of this whole section. Like, we're uncertain if, as she goes into the deep well, she is going to be able to do her duty in the end. Like, we know that this is her duty, this is her job. Charlie is just kind of there to make sure that it happens. And then obviously he'll have a role to play with Gog Magog, but we don't know that yet. I think it actually matters for us to go into this thing knowing that, hey, Leia is, like, good and kind and compassionate and has all these qualities that the rightful Queen of Empus should have. I think it's important that we establish and confirm that, because so far, at least in the last couple chapters, we've just seen her as a thing that is, like, obstinately standing in Charlie's way and refusing to acknowledge what the right thing to do is. So I think we do need some beats of her being just good, and this is one of them. Like this queen hugging this kind of lower class, bloodied, tortured man. I think it's just this really great moment for that.
I totally agree. I mean, I'm going to remind everyone of my previous paranoia around Leia, that like she seemed like Ice Queen is too strong, but like she was so kind of aloof and above and separate and vaguely creepy in a way that I couldn't quite put my finger on. But like part of it is just like her mouth was gone, and you know, she would like puppeteer people, which is sort of darkness coded.
Sure.
So all of that being said, like I think it was important that we established like no, her heart is actually good. Her conflict is coming from like an emotionally understandable and relatable place. It's not that she's like secretly bad, it's that she's conflicted, and we now fully understand why. So I agree, by the time we went into the conflict, but the climax rather, you know, pretty much past this point, I had dismissed all of my previous paranoia. I wasn't wondering in the back of my mind, like, is she actually gonna, you know, at the last second try to, you know, join forces with Eldon? At the worst, it was like I thought maybe she wouldn't be able to bring herself to do what needed to be done, and Charlie would have to step up and do it. But I wasn't thinking like, oh, she's a liar, she's been manipulating everyone the whole time. That was put to rest, I think, by about this point.
I do think it's pretty great that, like, I think your paranoia came from a logical place in the end. That what you were picking up on, I think, in your mistrust of Leia was kind of her obstinance and refusal to see the truth of the situation. And I think it's fun because the book never states that directly until about this point in the story, right? Until we get to the end. But you picked up on something that was coming from her. And I think that's what King was very kind of cleverly doing, is maybe holding her at a slight distance for you to establish that there's something she's holding back. There's something she's not being honest with us about. And that is like this idea that she's just not accepting the reality of what this situation is. It's pretty great, actually, and pretty astute of you. It's in the end.
Well, thank you. You know, so it's interesting because we talked a bit about the idea of ugliness in this book, and how it takes an almost childishly straightforward interpretation of just like things that are ugly or bad. We've seen this a few times, right? We talked about the idea of like, well, maybe they're going to do something, you know, tricky, and it's like, no, all of the grotesque monsters just turn out to be really bad. And the thing is, like, having a guy with no eyes, a woman with no mouth, and a woman with no ears, that's grotesque, right? That's ugliness. And the thing is, and maybe this is kind of skipping to the end in a certain sense, but like that ugliness is not really that, like, I'm not going to go so far as to say that Eldon didn't actually do that to them, but like those are such poetic punishments that it's almost more like by their refusal to do what needed to be done, they earned those punishments.
Yeah.
So the ugliness came from their choices, which were wrong. The wrong choices.
I agree. I totally agree. Yeah, I think that complicates the pretty good ugly bad stuff just enough for me to mean for it to not just be as cut and dry as all that. And I think Eldon does as well, right? Like Eldon was this you know, born with a deformity, mocked and belittled by people, and yes, Eldon was bad in the end, but like, again, that was not because of his foot or because of his back or because of his ugliness. It was it was because the ugliness was not accepted by the fairy tale world. It's because people looked at Eldon and saw him as this person that he eventually became that person. So I think that is, again, just enough of a complication on the idea that it doesn't come off as just straight up like, no, King is saying that ugly is bad. I don't think that's what this book ultimately says.
Agree.
All right. So Charlie asks Jaya to take Percival back to safety where the others are waiting, and their party is once again reduced by one. With some words of warning from Percival on who awaits him, they continue on, opening a secret passage that heads down into the depths again. The secret passage, which, by the way, they could have just taken instead of having to go all the way up that scary elevator. This is the one they could have just gone in. Here we are.
Yep. Thanks, Leia.
Yeah. The voices return, scaring Charlie into thinking his father is dead and also reminding him of his time with Birdie Bird. And I do love this as well, Matt. We were approaching some great power, and if I had ever doubted the existence of evil as a real force, something separate from that which lived in the hearts and minds of mortal men and women, I didn't now. So, okay, this kind of gets back to what we were talking about last week, where you were kind of like maybe musing that this is an evolution or a change to the way King approaches the concept, the idea of evil in his universe. I think in the end of the day, and let me know if you disagree with me here, the way this statement right here and then the way the book ends generally, I think actually it reinforces the way King thinks pretty cleanly. That this just is in line, I think, with how King postures evil in his stories.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was funny. We kind of talked earlier in the show about, in this book particularly, about how we felt like maybe it was doing something different now, but I think it kind of came back around.
Yeah,
in a way that I felt satisfied with.
Yeah. I do love the realization here that Leia and Eldon must have come down to this place as children, this horrible, awful place with whispers talking to you about your biggest insecurities. Like, you can kind of imagine if these voices are whispering to Charlie, reminding him of his alcoholic father that's probably worried sick about him, reminding him of these events he did when he was with Birdie as a kid. Like, what are these things saying to Eldon? Like you can just kind of imagine it, and it's kind of shocking that they just kind of played down here. And then this realization that comes from Charlie is that, Leia, you didn't really want to come down here, actually, did you? No, this was all your brother wanting to come down here, and you could feel the wrongness of this, but he didn't seem bothered by it, huh? And I think this is another little thing in the chinks of the armor that Leia has built up around herself in this image of her brother. Like, that, yes, maybe he himself isn't this great evil, maybe he was possessed by this great evil, but he was oddly attracted to it from the beginning. That this is something that, a person like Leia sees this and turns around and turns away and says, no, this is wrong, I don't want to be here. But someone like Eldon is like, interesting, I want to explore this a little further.
Yeah, he kind of invited it in, right?
Yeah.
Not to repeat what you just said, but like there's a dynamic with the whole ugliness thing where, like, Eldon is bullied due to his physical features, treated poorly, tries to escape, seeks a kind of revenge against the world for treating him this way. His mind is opened to this kind of darkness by the way that he's treated by the world. And then once he lets that darkness in, now he is a literal monster. He sort of becomes the thing that everyone thought that he was, which is horrible. Doesn't excuse or explain his actions, that he was sort of bullied into this. I mean, it does sort of explain the actions. It doesn't excuse the actions.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with that for sure. I also love this part a little bit here. Here's another fairy tale, I thought. One meant for adults instead of children. No big bad wolf, no giant, no Rumpelstiltskin. That's a version of Cthulhu over those arches. And is that what Gog-Magog is? High priest of the elder gods, dreaming his malevolent dreams in the ruins of R'lyeh? Is that what Eldon wants to ask another favor of? So, like, I love this idea. Like, King is almost at the conclusion of his book, like, explaining to us, the reader, like, why he's doing the Cthulhu stuff here. Like, this has always been a mixture of grim fairy tales, kind of Tolkienian fairy stories, and Lovecraftian stuff. And he's kind of saying, like, look, Lovecraft is just fairy tales for adults. That's all it is. And that's his central argument here. And that's why it's included in this novel called Fairy Tale.
I love that. Feels right to me.
Yeah. So they finally emerge into a great room where Leia and Eldon parted ways. He went on further into the deep darks of this place, but she was too afraid to. We see here that Eris also can't take it, and she leaves, and that leaves just 3 members of our quartet: Charlie, Leia, and of course Radar too. He's still there hanging out.
Yep.
I really love this quote as well. You assumed your brother was dead. Yes. Then she clasped her throat, and guttural words emerged in front of her. is dead. Is. The self I had become, was still becoming, was older and wiser than the high school kid who had emerged in that field of poppies. This Charlie, Prince Charlie, understood that Leia had to believe that. Otherwise, the guilt of not trying to rescue him would have been too great to bear. Yet, I think by then, she knew better. I love this idea of not only are we getting this window into this very complicated, wonderful character that is Leia, but I love part of Charlie's growth and transformation in this book is him coming to realize how other people process grief and loss. I actually think this is a really important thing that kind of goes subtextual throughout the rest of this novel. He got so angry with his father after his mother died, right? And with good reason, right? His father became an alcoholic. His father was not doing his duties as a parent, and it's not a child's responsibility to like take care of their parent. But like I also think Charlie did not ever, and I think we might have talked about this before, but Charlie did not have a good window into like a level of empathy for what his father must be going through as well, like outside of just the disease of alcoholism, but just like losing someone and how a person processes losing someone and how they deal with that grief and how they channel that into something else. Like all of these characters, Leia, Claudia, and Woody, end up displaying different facets of a way a person deals with grief and loss and guilt and these kind of things. And I think it is really important. It really does matter that Charlie, throughout the journey, learns to understand that fundamentally. That okay, this thing doesn't make a lot of sense, but I get why they have to do it. I get why they have to tell themselves this story, this fairy tale of reality, because they can't face the truth.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like past around this point, we don't get any more of Charlie's sort of almost passive aggressive internal thoughts about his father's alcoholism.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that is part of his healing, is not just healing from the loss of his mother, but healing from this sense of betrayal and disappointment in his father.
Yeah.
Probably helps that his father doesn't succumb to drinking, even though he goes missing. But
yeah, it does. It does. And I mean, it also helps that his father like hit rock bottom and then climbed his way out of it, right? Like he doesn't leave his father, go into Empus with his father still actively an alcoholic, destroying his life and the life of his son. But it's clear that Charlie's not over it, right? Like his dad got better. His dad is working towards improving. His dad is making all the right choices now, but Charlie's still really angry about it. And he hasn't been processing that. And I think this is ultimately like the subtextual metaphor for everything that is happening here is, and realizing this now, you realize why Charlie's dad could not die, right? Like just the realization that this book is about Charlie learning to forgive his father, in a very complicated way. Then of course his dad can't die at the end then, if that's the case. And that becomes very obvious when looking at it in retrospect, that the moment of Charlie going home that we're going to get to in a couple chapters and hugging his father is a moment of catharsis, is a moment of I understand you now on a level I didn't before, and I forgive you. Even though he doesn't actually say that, but it's there. It's in the subtext. It's in how he deals with Leia here. It's in how he deals with Claudia and Woody later. It's in all of this. It's in how he deals with himself and the guilt he's carrying for himself and the things that he's done and the way he dealt with his grief. It's all there.
Love this so much. I love what you said in particular about like what the story is him learning to forgive his father, because before he crossed the threshold, we remarked on it so many times how he has these little shitty little thoughts about his father's behavior.
Yeah.
And when you return across the threshold in the hero's journey, in the classic sort of simplified hero's journey, you bring a gift from the other world, and it's like, well, what gift did he bring, right? It's not, there's only one answer. The gift he brought is this healing and sort of rebirth of his relationship with his father in a more mature adult way.
Yeah, for sure. I think absolutely. And I think that is ultimately symbolized by his choice to allow his father in on this whole thing, right? He doesn't, we're jumping so far ahead, but he doesn't deny Empus for his father. He tells him where he was. He tells him the truth. He shows him Empus, and he makes his father part of the job of protecting this place, and safeguarding this place, which I don't think Charlie would have done, and indeed did not do, before his journey down there. So
yeah. So that's true. He conspicuously lied and manipulated, and was not going to tell his dad any of this.
Yeah. All right. So the problem, as we zoom back to the present and not the stuff that's about to happen in 2 chapters from now, the problem that they're faced with is they don't know which of the 12 passageways in this chamber is the one that Eldon went down originally, because, as we said, Leia never followed him. But fortunately, Matt, they have a dog. Radar is able to sniff a piece of cloth from Eldon and his crew that Charlie, without thinking about it earlier, just like saw and picked up and stuffed in his pocket. Radar finds the scent, and they're off through the tunnel and into another world entirely. I want to take a step back here, because I think it's so funny that King does this all the time. Like we talked, I think, last week about plot contrivance, and this is like a dirty word sometimes when you're talking about how writers construct stories and plot. And this is a thing that King has kind of always done, where he's always positioned his characters in this way that's just like, oh, we have the right tools for right now. And it's so funny that like King solves this idea of people feeling that plots are contrived by almost just like leaning into it and just being like, yes, of course, this is just the way fate or Ka works. That yes, why did this story need to have a dog? Why did Charlie need to have a relationship with a dog? Because we needed a dog here in this moment. And why did he pick up that random piece of cloth he saw? Because he just felt like he needed to in the moment. Some force is dictating actions. It's just so funny to me that like I think we talked about this when we talked about the Dark Tower. I don't know, it's been forever now, but like just the idea that he's built up this bulletproof shield against the ideas of plot contrivance, because it's like, oh, that's pretty convenient that Charlie just so happened to pick up that cloth, isn't it? And he'll be like, yes, it is. That's Ka.
Yeah, just embracing the narrative convention and being like, hey, do you want this to be fun?
Yeah.
Because if you want it to be fun,
this is a story. Let it be a story. Yeah.
Right. We're going to have to accept some of these things. And otherwise, you're not. It is funny when people complain about contrivance. It's like, hey, I get it. It's not that I don't get it, but there's really only one place that path leads, and that's to you not enjoying stories anymore.
Yeah.
So that's why I personally kind of never, unless something just seems really stupid, which that's not what's happening here.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
This is just a question, because maybe I was misunderstanding what was happening in this scene, but like, is this area they're in meant to sort of be a geometrically impossible location, like a kind of pocket dimension, or are they just like deeper underground than I'm imagining?
I mean, they're very, very deep underground, but I'm not sure what you mean. Like, so they go into it's a large chamber that has many chambers feeding off of it. And it's not until they pick a chamber that they are transported to the new world that has the stars overhead and the well down below.
I guess I wasn't sure if the transition point was, prior to this room.
It is not. It is after this. I think it's very specifically says like just I think you could probably look at this as like the bat cave that they walk through on their way into Empus, and it's not until you're like walking through the tunnel outside of the bat cave that Charlie felt the weird vertigo feeling of transitioning to a new world. Like, I think this is a similar thing where they're in this giant cavern. I mean, what you can perhaps reason as we look at all these tunnels, and this is one of the fun things that King does here, very Lovecraftian, this idea that like there's 12 tunnels here, perhaps each one of them leads to a different world, and it's the tunnel that Eldon take that leads to this dark world of ultimate evil, but there could be 11 other worlds there, maybe some even more evil than this one, like this is this cool thing that's left open for us that I'm glad we don't really expound upon.
Yeah, I figure one leads to Halloween Town.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So they're in another giant chamber, and as we said, the sky is open up above. There's stars, and below them, a winding staircase that goes down to a well with a huge derrick over it. Below, Flight Killer awaits with the 4 men carrying his palanquin. Leia sprints ahead of Charlie and into the 4 men who we think at first are attacking her, but are actually just fleeing. And one of them just runs into her sword. Oops.
Very funny. Very funny how Leia just kills a man who is 100% not fighting back.
Mm-hmm. As Charlie descends, he suddenly sees the 2 moons of Empus above him, somehow on a collision course. They smash into each other and disintegrate as the derrick begins to move and the well begins to open. Uh-oh.
It's awesome.
Uh-oh, Matt.
Yep.
And we're off now. We just like sprint into the climax now. Eldon's robe gets blown off and we see him in his full form, and this is where I'll give you the credit that you deserve, Matt. Here, you were right. Underneath this robe is tentacles everywhere. I think that was a pretty safe bet, but yes, like he's kind of half man, half Cthulhu monster, and he's before our eyes transforming into full Cthulhu, as more and more tentacles are growing out of his face, his neck, everywhere. It's super gross.
It's gnarly. I love it.
Yeah. What else is gnarly is Leia, in a desperate attempt to stop him, grabs her knife and slices her mouth open as she screams to him, "Eldon!" She screamed. Blood flew from her reopened mouth in a fine spray. Her voice was hoarse from her feats of ventriloquism, I suppose. But the first word she'd spoken without having to project it from deep in her throat was loud enough for her wretched brother to hear, even over the hum. He turned. He saw her, really saw her, for the first time. "Eldon, stop while there's still time." This, I just want, like, this fucking rules. Like, all the, from here on out, everything just rules. But like, this image of her grabbing a knife and just slicing her mouth open and screaming at her brother to stop it, just, it's so fucking metal, and I love it to death.
Yeah, like, that's one fun thing about this book we haven't really talked about much, is how much like awesome imagery there is.
Yeah.
Where it's like you can really imagine this being in like in a classic fairy tale, the idea of something as just like evocative, visually memorable as this woman with a sealed shut mouth slicing her mouth open so that she can at the climactic moment shout what she needs to shout. It's just a great moment, great climax overall.
Totally. One thing we didn't talk about, and I think it was the week we had taken off that this news dropped, was that they are moving forward with a television show version of this story. And I think this is part of the reason why people want to make this, because like, it is so visually distinct and awesome. You can kind of just imagine, like, the second I read the scene, I thought about the TV show, and I was like, oh man, this scene in particular, if done right, is going to be really, really awesome. And it's a show being done by the independent film studio A24. It's got Paul Greengrass as the one of the directors. And I think he wrote the script of the original feature film that they were going to make, and then they decided to turn it into a TV show. So I'm pretty excited about this. We're going to have to come back and cover this in some way when it eventually comes out. But yeah, I was thinking about that a lot while I was reading this climax, because it's all very, very visually just awesome.
They're totally going to have the real world look all gray and shitty, and then it's going to look all colorful and cool when they go to Empus.
I would expect nothing else. I'd be disappointed if they didn't do that.
Yeah.
So Eldon, Matt, for his part, tells Leia to go back, that he can't stop it, that he's lost control. So I think, Matt, what this does reveal to us that while Leia was not correct in that this wasn't her brother, that Eldon and Flight Killer weren't the same people, she was correct that there's still a little bit of the old boy in there, huh? Does that make this better or worse?
Worse.
Yeah. I think you're right. And I think I want to read this because I think this is an important distinction of this. Like, he says, get away. He says, go away. She doesn't listen. And then we get this part. He says to her, "You were all part of it," the flabby green-faced creature shrieked at Leia. "You were all part of it, or you would have come with me. You would have been my queen." So I think, like, the book doesn't actually stop to expand upon what specifically Eldon is saying here. But essentially what he's saying is that, like, everyone hated me, everyone teased me, and you were part of it too, right? Like you were supposed to be with me. You were supposed to be the one person out of everyone that understood me, that was kind to me, that loved me, but even you abandoned me. You were supposed to be here with me. You were supposed to be part of this with me. And he resents her for that. He's angry with her for that. And I think that's why I agree with your assessment here that like Eldon, which is true to Stephen King and true to how Stephen King writes evil. Yes, this thing that Eldon turned into is the result of this extra human deep well of evil that exists in the universe. But that well of evil cannot open itself. It has to be let in. It has to have a person willingly take that in upon themselves. And that is what Eldon has done here.
Yeah, and to me, what this says is that even that little bit of him that might be left in there has been corrupted and bent. Because, I mean, I think textually speaking, it's just totally unfair of him to say that she's part of it. It's like, no, she did everything she possibly could reasonably be expected to do. She absolutely loved him. It was the two of them against the world, and she wasn't willing to, basically turn herself over to this darkness for what exactly, right? Like a shot at revenge or something. Like that wasn't fair or right of him to even ask of her. And it just shows like even if this is like the real Eldon talking, it's like, well, this guy sucks actually.
Yeah, I agree. And as he says to her, you should have been my queen, which by the way, gross, Eldon, your brother and sister, gross.
Yeah.
Weirdo.
There's more that Game of Thrones stuff that we keep seeing.
Yeah. But Leia, another badass moment where she says, I am the queen. And she realizes perhaps that this thing in front of her, even if it used to be, is no longer her brother. She stabs Eldon in the eye. And as he dies, Gog Magog, emerging from the opening in the well, grabs him and consumes him. The well continues to open and the dark evil emerges. Leia tries to command it to stop, but is unable to do so. And that's, Matt, when Charlie remembers something. He remembers that this is a fairy tale. And what is true about fairy tales? Names are important.
Yes. That's great lead into the final climax.
Yes. It's great shit. It's really, really great shit all around. Like, again, very visual. You have Charlie trying to shoot Eldon with the gun, but a tentacle swaps out and hits it away. Then they finally take down Eldon. Leia finally does her part, and that body is just immediately consumed by Gog Magog, as if that didn't matter at all. It's just really awesome.
Yeah, exactly. So Scott, you're gonna make fun of me. I already know this. It's fine.
I would never do that. I have never done that, and I will never do that.
Okay. Do you think Stephen King played Elden Ring as soon as it came out, and then that influenced the climax of this novel?
You fucking nerd.
Yeah, laugh it up, everybody. Here's my proof. Every detail about the climax of Elden Ring is in the climax of this book. And I'm specifically referencing, okay, look, my spoilers for the ending of a video game, which the plot doesn't actually matter, so it doesn't matter. It's not a spoiler. Like the final boss of that game is a giant sort of Lovecraftian monster that has like aspects, like elements of dragon, but also elements of kind of tentacles, and is like a very like black and gold color motif, which, if I remember correctly, is kind of how Gog Magog is described here, sort of an incomprehensible alien flesh. And this creature, this dragon-like creature, first it sort of like consumes the thing that you thought was the boss creature, which is analogous to the beast consuming Eldon. And then it comes out and you have to fight it. But it's called the Elden Beast, Scott. It's the Elden Beast. That's what the boss of Elden Ring is called, and it's the game. The game is called Elden Ring, by the way.
Do you think, perhaps, when George R. R. Martin and the people that wrote the story of Elden Ring, and Stephen King were borrowing from imagery and stories that have existed throughout time when they put these stories together. Do you think that could possibly be?
I just know. I just know that when I was imagining this happening, I was like, oh, he's describing the Elden Beast. And then this is what actually happened in my head. As he was describing the thing coming out of the thing, he was like, wait a minute, gold looks kind of like a dragon, but isn't a dragon. It's the Elden Beast. And then I realized Stephen King has secretly been playing FromSoft games all this time. And it really explains a lot.
So I just want you, like, timing wise, Elden Ring is released in February of 2022. Fairy Tale is released in September of 2022. So for this to be true, Stephen King would have had to buy Elden Ring upon release. Play it to its entirety, which is, it's a long game. It takes a while. Then write a whole book and have it ready to be released 6 months later.
If I ever have a chance to ask him a question, this is the only question I'm going to ask. Did you play Elden Ring? Okay.
We're having some fun here, but the real reason for this is that this is a book that is tapping into imagery and stories and ideas and concepts that have existed for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And I think that's what Elden Ring is doing with a lot of this stuff as well. Like, yes, it's Elden Ring is putting a spin on it. Yes, that story is incomprehensible. So I don't know, but like Elden Ring is very Lovecraftian. Like, you have to admit that, right?
Totally. Okay. Let me now become serious, because we did have our fun. Like, I think it's actually pretty cool that, I totally agree. Elden Ring is reaching for this Lovecraftian cosmic horror. Like, very explicitly, Elden Ring is a cosmic horror, subgenre of fantasy, which is what this is doing too. So I just thought it was it was just legitimately very cool for me in that moment to realize the almost like convergent evolution, where it's like, the sort of what's a better like pastiche of Lovecraftian horror and fantasy than like a Cthulhu dragon that is like ethereal and like it doesn't quite fit into the like, it's not quite a dragon, it's not quite a Cthulhu, it's kind of a weird morphy gross thing that's it has elements you don't quite know how to place. And I was like, that's really, I just thought that was actually really cool. To be serious for a second.
No, it is really cool. I didn't think about the Elden Ring connections, but I also have not spent near as much time absorbing the story of that game as you have. So I think you're onto something there. But no, I don't think Stephen King has played Elden Ring.
I think he probably has not, to be honest.
I want to talk to you about this part real quick as we're kind of seeing Charlie's mental connections realize the whole name thing and the Rumpelstiltskin of it all. What I love is this. It says, what flashed before me like illustrations in a book whose pages are quickly fanned were all the fairy tales I had encountered in Empus, from the shoe woman to the goose girl to the house of the three little exiles to the mean sisters who never would have taken their beautiful little sister or deformed little brother to the ball. I just wanted to say here that I didn't make the Cinderella connection to her evil stepsisters being mean to her from last week, and I'm kind of mad at myself about that. I don't think you did either. I'm just kind of disappointed in myself that connection, in retrospect, seems very, very clear.
Yeah, no, I definitely had to have that spelled out.
Yeah. But then we get this part. As Charlie is realizing it's always been about Rumpelstiltskin from Charlie, or from Christopher Polly to Peterkin, to the fact that it was the Rumple Bridge that his mother was killed on. It's all been Rumpelstiltskin the entire time. And so he knows what to do. I know your name, I shouted. The voice was not my own. No more than many of the thoughts and insights in the story belonged to the 17-year-old boy who first came to Empus. It was the voice of a prince, not of this world, and not of mine. I'd begun by calling Empus the other, but I was the other. Still Charlie Reed, sure, but I was someone else as well. And the idea that I had been sent here, that my clock had been wound and set years ago when my mother walked across that bridge munching a chicken wing for just this moment, was impossible to doubt. Later, when the person I was in that underground world began to ebb away, I would doubt it. But then, no. Fucking love this. Fucking love this, Matt. He like the culmination of this idea that who is he becoming? Like our assumption was, well, he's becoming the Prince of Empus. He's becoming Prince Charlie of Empus. And what the book is saying is just like, no. Actually, this power, this thing that's happening to him, this transformation that's happening to him is beyond Empus. It's beyond our world. It's beyond all worlds. It's essentially he's becoming Prince Charlie of the White, right? He is becoming a avatar for the forces of good in this world. And just like every other time when the force of good push things towards an outcome that they want, they do it in some of the most unimaginable fucked up ways ever, including killing your mom to set you on this path. And that just is so in line with everything Stephen King thinks. It's absolutely incredible. I loved this so much.
Yeah, totally. Sorry, I just have to go for it. Charlie, yes, that was what they used to call me, Charlie the Gray. Well, I am Charlie the White, because that's basically what it is. I love the idea. Yes. As soon as you said he's becoming Charlie of the White, it's like Prince Charlie of the White. Yeah, that's it. And it's fun. It's very funny and I don't know, interesting that King never says Ka in this book. He never says the White. Mm-hmm. He does say there are other worlds than these, so that's sort of his thing that he does. But he really avoids the standard connections. But that is what this is. This is the White manifesting through Charlie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a wonderful moment, as is when he screams out the name of Gog Magog, and Gog Magog itself screams back. And I love that he takes pleasure in Gog Magog's scream of pain, and it says it's because I am a dark prince. I take pleasure in this torturous scream. Oh man, what a great kind of culmination of this. I really love it.
Yeah, me too. I think one thing I expected to see more of a confrontation between good Charlie and dark Charlie.
Yeah.
Between Charlie the White and, whatever darkness he was tapping into in himself. And it wasn't really overt. It was more like there was a synthesis, honestly, than any kind of conflict. It was like these two Charlies did the predator handshake, and crush the bad guy.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. We talked about that last week, that we were expecting this is the way the story would go. I think in retrospect, like, it does seem to align with what King does with these kind of tapped heroes of the White, in that they're always kind of gunslinger-esque. And in that, I mean, they have this great steel at the core of them, but are flawed, often dark people. Like, I mean, Roland is the greatest and central example of this, right? Roland is not a traditionally good person, right. And is kind of the perfect tool for the White in what he's willing to do. And I think that's kind of true generally across the board. So it makes sense that it's actually a combination of all of Charlie's good qualities and all of his bad qualities that make him this perfect avatar of what the forces of good want him to do. So it makes sense.
Yep.
But I think the interesting thing is it's not the dark part of him that it allows him to win here, right? Like, it is this kind of wonderful culmination moment that I really, really love, of him realizing that, oh, it's the name, it's the power of the name. I've known this. It's always been about this, and coming to this realization and doing this thing. But it's not as if like he needed to be Dark Prince for this to happen. Like, right?
Yeah. Well, he didn't have to do anything particularly dark.
Yeah.
Here. Yeah, mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah. I do love this, though. How did you know? Leia asked in her broken voice. A story my mother told me, I said, which was, in a way, true. She had told me now, by dying then. Can we, fuck the White, man? so fucked up.
Yeah. standard Ka bullshit.
But again, like I love doing this thing where we kind of step back and be like, okay, but why does Stephen King do this? Like, why have this continually happen? And the answer I keep coming back to is something we've talked about in the last couple books, is that this guy is desperately trying to put meaning and understanding to all of the terrible things he sees in the world. Like, he cannot look away from some of the most terrible horror he sees in the world, and he feels compelled to write about it. And but at the same time, he wants an understanding to it. He wants there to be a reason. He wants there to be a some kind of greater purpose. So you look at a child who's lost their mother. Why? Some stupid freak accident on a bridge, some stupid guy, and some stupid local government bullshit that didn't put up the safety regulations in time. Just stupid nonsense that happens every day. And he's desperately trying to find meaning and purpose behind it, because like, that's what we all want. We don't want life to be just this random collection of events that some are great and some are awful, and then we'd never know what's going to happen. We want it to have meaning. We want it to have purpose. Like, we talked about Ka as this concept of good storytelling, and I think that's what it is, because we desperately want life to be a story, right? Like, that's what we want.
Yeah.
And I think this is so in line with everything he believes and with what we want to believe, that I really, really like it.
Yeah, I don't remember if we called this out in the first episode, but it's another character struck by a vehicle tragedy.
Yep, we did, yeah.
But and then finding a narrative through line from that to some good, some meaning actually coming of that, which at the time we kind of suspected was where we were going to go, right? I think even at the time we were like, what, this is Charlie's origin story clearly, but why? Like, to what end? And now we see the full form of that.
Yeah. All right, so on their way back out, Charlie peeks into the flight killer's palanquin and finds Petra, who yells at him about how she would have been queen if not for him. She bites Charlie, taking a chunk out of his arm, but then Leia like shoots her in the face, so she's dead.
Yeah.
All right, Matt, what's the deal with Petra? Like, we briefly brought her up last week as this thing that the book seemed to be giving an extraordinary amount of focus to, that in the end serves to just like chomp on Charlie to like take him out and allow us to have like a recovery sequence in the denouement of this book. We learn here that she's Leia's great aunt. So what's going on here, actually?
I see her as being the final note of the motif of people wanting more life, people wanting to stretch out their life, and at the expense of living a life worth living, which is a relevant theme in a story where you have a kid who lost his mother and really acutely feels like the pain of a loss, the pain of death. And this is specifically the kid that came here on this mission to extend the life of his dog, because the idea of the dog dying was so painful and unacceptable. And Petra is there to be like, hey, I get it, narratively speaking. I get why you want that, but this is what actually results. You kind of turn into a vampire version of yourself, not a literal vampire, but that, she's got filed teeth and she's undying and she's, totally amoral. So she's kind of a vampire, you could say.
Sure. No, I think that makes sense. I also just like really want to slot her in like the wicked stepmother thing as well. Like, I'm desperately trying to put everyone into a fairy tale now, because like I'm mad at myself for missing the Cinderella thing, but it just seems like she's like the perfect, like, like the Snow White witch, like she's just like every amalgamation of like the evil witch in fairy tale. She just seems to slot into a lot of those.
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right. So they begin to make their way out. And as Charlie gets worse and worse, his wound is not actually poisoned, but we also know that the mouth of Petra was like licking the spit of flight, like the saliva, the goop of Flight Killer, and that he's so nasty and corrupted that essentially is poisonous. They get one last help here by the Snab, who shows up and summons thousands of fireflies to light their way out. By the time they get out of the storage closet, Charlie is barely unconscious. He's carried up by his friends, and we see that Empus is starting to change already. We see sunlight for the first time. There's sun. And as Charlie is about to pass out, he's got one more job to do. He stands up and informs the crowd that the flight killer is dead, Gog Magog is shut and locked away, and Leia is once again the queen of Empus. And as he collapses, our chapter comes to an end. So that's it, Matt. That's the climax. We did it. We did it.
Awesome.
All right, chapter 31, Visitors, the Queen in White, Mercy, Woody, and Claudia leaving Empus. All right, so this is the denouement as we talked about, and I like the denouement of this book a lot, Matt. It fits. It all fits very, very well.
Yeah, and it is a nice after kind of a run of downer endings. It's a nice happy ending. I appreciate it.
It is, and maybe we'll talk about that. So as Charlie is recovering, he is visited by the dead. He is visited by Iota, by Claw, by Kellen, by Petra. And there's some indication here, Matt, that these visits are not entirely in Charlie's head. I think the Petra one specifically, Radar is barking at the corner where Petra is standing, right? So maybe we're led to believe there's some more magic going on here. This is not just like the delusions of a sick recovering patient. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a magic world. I was willing to accept that maybe these were the ghosts of these people on their way out to the next realm, just coming to say bye.
Yeah. And it might offer an explanation as to why, like, it's these people in particular, right? Like, because like if you're gonna be Charlie visited by the dead, like you would expect his mom to show up, right? If he's gonna be hallucinating dead people to come visit him in his like fever dreams, like why would he think about Kellen and Claw and Petra?
Also, like, this is a world that like the undead are all over the place. So
yeah.
It's fine. That's fine. Were you also imagining the part at the end of Return of the King where Frodo wakes up in Minas Tirith and all the characters come in and everybody's laughing happily? Is that what you were imagining during this part?
100%.
Good.
Although I really thought he was in Rivendell. Was he not in Rivendell?
That was after he's stabbed by the White.
Yeah, but I thought like the end. Is he in Minas Tirith? I guess that makes sense. Yeah, but my brain always put him back in Rivendell again because that's where he woke up the last time. He was gravely injured and then woke up with his friends surrounding him.
Yeah, I mean the room that they're in does have kind of a Rivendell vibe, but it's got to be Minas Tirith because they then have the like king ceremony and everything.
Yeah, you're right. But yes, I was thinking of that. Yes, it was. I mean, and you know what I bet? I bet Stephen King was as well. That's what I bet.
Yep. Think so.
So he's also visited by the living, as we said, especially Dora, who is gradually recovering from the gray, who's kind of our symbol that this horrible curse that was put on the land is starting to recede. Dora is getting better. She's able to speak in a way that he can understand, and everything is gradually getting better. I love this.
It's awesome.
I also love when Claudia comes to kind of tell him about his wound. He asks how much skin they had to remove, and she says up to the elbow and almost down to the wrist, a hateful fucking gore she gave him, and it will leave a hollow where the muscle won't ever come back. Your days of playing games are probably over, Charlie. The way that's worded, right? Like, it's not just like, oh, you're not going to have really good use of your arm anymore. Your days of playing games. Like, it's a different thing to say sports, but to say games, it seems like very specifically charged. Is like, we reasoned, we had many theories about what Charlie's arc over the story was going to be. We reasoned because he was 17 and already kind of prematurely made to be an adult by the events of his mother's death and his father's alcoholism, that this wasn't going to be a coming of age story. But I do think in the end it kind of is. Maybe coming of age is not the right term, but like coming to maturity.
Yeah.
And this idea that like it's your times of games are over now.
Yeah.
Is perfect.
Leaving behind childhood. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's, there's something to be said for the idea that King has a lot of protagonists and characters that are like 11, fewer that are like 17, 18, 19, right? But I think that's the thing is like that's the window of like at 11 you first have these sort of experiences that shatter the idea of childhood, but the process of becoming an adult doesn't actually finish when you're 11. It finishes much closer to when you're 20. Yeah. So I think that's what we're doing with Charlie.
Totally. We see that Percy comes to visit as well. He's doing much better, and he explains to Charlie how the effects of Gog Magog and Flight Killer are slowly being reversed. The trolleys are even up and running, Matt. The trolleys. How do they work, you ask? Magic.
Yeah. They're just trolleys. They just are.
So Charlie continues to slowly get better until finally Leia comes to visit him, and she says, "Sit with me, my dear. I need to look at you, and we need to talk." And my dear, has anyone been harder friend zoned by being called my dear? Or I guess technically this is being mom zoned.
Yeah.
This is what I want to say is that like Leia's Charlie's mom, like, right? Like Leia's Charlie's mom, right?
I don't know that I saw that as quickly as you did, but as soon as you pointed it out, I was like, yes, totally.
Yeah, I mean, here she we said immediately that Charlie was in love with her, which, you know, Freud would have a field day with that. But like, Leia says Charlie is too young for love kisses, and then she's quite a bit older than he is, at least double his age. So like, she's his mom, and like this is I think really, really, really important actually, because like we talk about what is this book about? What does this book mean? I think Charlie immediately falls in love with this woman because he is desperate. He's desperate for a mother figure. He's desperate for this thing that he lost. And does Charlie in his teenageness confuse this as potential for romantic love? Sure. But what Charlie really wants is his mommy back. Yeah. And that is everything he feels for Leia here, I think.
Yeah, and the healing here is that he gets to have some proper closure with Leia and you know, say goodbye to her, which he never got to have with his own mother.
Yeah, totally agree. So Charlie assumes because of her age that she must have like used the magical sundial, but she hasn't. I guess the answer here, Matt, is that the royalty and Empus just like live longer and age slower naturally. Like they're basically like the Numenorians, right? They just live a long time.
And time is weird here anyway, so true. I didn't think too much about it.
Yeah. But we do learn, Matt, one thing that the book hadn't answered yet is what the consequences of the sundial are. Leia says here, it changes the mind and the heart, nor is that all it does. My friend Mr. Bowditch wrote on it, and he wasn't a bad guy. In fact, he was a good guy. This was true, but as I looked back, I realized it wasn't completely true. And I love this idea that like, first of all, we learn it makes you sterile and barren, but also it changes you. And seeing Mr. Bowditch as this loner, this crotchety, angry old man, like I love this idea that the change isn't like you become evil, right? It's not like as profound and immediate as like, you ride around on this thing even once and you're going to be evil. No, it's just like it sharpens the darkness that's inside all people is kind of what the implication here is. And the reason why it's fine for Radar is because doggies are perfect. Yes. And they don't have any evil inside them because doggies didn't eat the apple. That was what people did.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I like, Bowditch, like he barely even was able to make a connection with Charlie, and Charlie is this incredibly remarkable person.
Yeah.
Just like it's funny because we came around to liking Bowditch, but like our first impression of Bowditch is very negative. So, it's reasonable.
Yeah, and I think Charlie kind of talks through like how long and how difficult it was for him to break through Bowditch's kind of shield he puts up, and that I think he specifically says, if I hadn't made a promise to God to make up for what God did for my father. I'm using the word God here loosely, right? It's not. It's we know. I don't have to say this. But like I wouldn't have been able to get through that. I wouldn't have been able to break through that wall he set up. So yeah, like it's all part of his failure caused by this ride on this sundial. So I think that's cool. I think it makes sense also why this thing is not so heavily used. It just kind of robs a person of who they are and also their ability to make more life. I love that idea that you become sterile because by granting yourself more life, you are essentially robbing yourself of the additional life, the ability to create more life. And I think that's really, really important.
Yeah. The true immortality, which is through children. Yeah.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, I think this is a great metaphor. I'd said basically the same thing before, but wonderfully tying everything together with this idea of you have a character who suffered a loss. You feel like you do anything for more life, more time, but then you realize, hey, that's actually a mistake. It robs your life of the things that make it worth living. That was kind of the situation that Bowditch was in, is just kind of running out the clock. Although, of course, if you think about this, on the level of the White, like the White probably needed him to go on the sundial so that he could actually live long enough to meet Charlie, which is like, once again, basically the White demanding someone sacrifice and suffer for the greater good, right?
Yep. So Leia also explains to him why she stayed away for so long. That being around Charlie reminds her of her shame, the bad thing that she did, pretending that she didn't know that Flight Killer was her brother, and choosing not to act as he took her kingdom and warped it into something ugly and terrible. Charlie, for his part, tells Leia of his great shame, his time with Birdie Bird. And Matt, finally, we get to the thing that he's most ashamed of that they did together. And this was stealing crutches from a crippled man. He was a crippled man on a bench enjoying the sun, and Birdie and I looked at each other, and Birdie said, "Let's swipe his crutches." I guess it was that strain you talked about, the evil. We swooped down and took them, and he yelled at us to bring them back, but we didn't. We took them to the edge of the park and threw them in the duck pond. Birdie threw one, and I threw the other, laughing the whole time. We threw the crippled man's crutches in the water, and how he ever got home, I don't know. They splashed, and we laughed. Okay, yeah, that's pretty bad, Charlie. That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad.
Yeah. So we knew this was coming. This is one of the predictions we can call is that the story was building up toward Charlie eventually unburdening himself of the worst thing that he thinks he ever did. Mm-hmm. And it is indeed pretty bad. I think this is actually hits like this perfect sweet spot where you see why you would be horribly ashamed of this for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And you see why you would avoid thinking about it or telling anyone about it. But also it's not like they, killed a homeless person like I jokingly said before. Where it's
they might have. What if this guy couldn't get home?
That's true. I don't think they did, but once again, it's like, well, this is kind of how Charlie's a good person, is that he feels bad about this.
Yeah.
Like it's not that a good person never does anything bad and a good person never makes mistakes, is that a good person feels guilt about it and wants to live it down somehow. Right.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And so he tells the story and Leia's reaction is, "Why did you tell me this, Charlie?" Which is funny. He says to her, I didn't know when I started. I thought it was one story I'd never tell anyone, but I knew now. He says to her, "I stole your crutches. All I can say as my defense is that I had to." So I thought about this for a long time, Matt. And I got to a place where I understand what King is going for here with him just establishing this stealing crutches metaphor and applying it here. I don't know if it really works the way King wants it to, though. This is like in an ending of a book I really, really enjoyed. This is such a pivotal scene, and this is one thing that I was like, I don't know if he nailed this. Actually, what do you think?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I had this thought before I read the script and heard your thoughts about it. I didn't love this conversation overall, not just this moment, but I felt like this conversation was written in like 3 different sittings, and there are, I don't have them at my fingertips, but there are like specific moments where it's like they're having one conversation and then that conversation just stops and the subject changes with no transition, because that's just that King knew that in this conversation we had to convey A, B, and C, and there was no good bridge between A to B and B to C, and so he just kind of and then it's fine. It was a rough patch, and part of that rough patch is like, I think King knew that he wanted this story to be in there somehow, and it doesn't quite stitch into the fabric of the conversation they're having in a way that works. It feels forced to me.
Yeah, so like, I mean, let's say what this means, right? Like, essentially what he's saying is like, he came into her world and like ripped down the thing that she was using to support her. Essentially, I think this is what King is going for. And you tell me if I'm wrong here, because I thought about this for a long time because I just didn't like the construction of this. I didn't think it was clear. Essentially, he comes to Empis and her crutches are essentially these lies that she's built up around herself to survive and live in this world. And he comes in and he rips them away and throws them away and says, have fun, good luck. I mean, is that what it is? Like, do you agree with my assessment there?
That's what it is, but
I don't like that.
But also it has nothing to do with the story, because he didn't rip her crutches away for kicks because it amused him.
Yeah.
He needed her to get off her ass and become the hero that she was meant to be.
Yeah.
It was necessary. There were people suffering.
Right. Like, yeah, like it doesn't work because this crippled man enjoying sun was not like avoiding his problems by sitting on a park bench and by throwing away. Like, it was a bad thing. It was a like unjustifiable, awful thing he did to this random person. And you can't take this unjustifiable, awful thing and then metaphor it into a righteous moment of action against a person that's not doing her duty. It just doesn't work that way. Like,
yeah,
like I think it makes much more sense for me that Charlie shares this story with Leia, not because he's going to construct this metaphor about this is what I did to you and I'm apologizing for it, but rather because she is coming to him with this great guilt that she is carrying. And what he's saying in my mind essentially is like, I did it too. So like, you're not alone in this. Like we both have pasts in which we made horrible choices and did things we shouldn't have done and didn't act when we should and chose wrong. We've done it before. We find a way through it. That's what we do. I don't like it. Like, textually it says like, why did you tell me this? And he says, I didn't know when I started, but now it all makes sense to me because I stole your crutches. And I'm like, no, you really didn't though, Charlie. Like you really like I will gladly get on your shit for all the terrible things you've done in your life. This is not one of them.
Yeah. Right. I think the way that sentence should have continued is he should have said, I didn't know when I started, but now I realize it's that doing a bad thing and feeling really bad about it led to me feeling a strong need to make up for that. And if it hadn't been for that, then I never would have come to Empis in the first place, and I never would have saved your realm.
Yeah.
So what you do, Queen, is you take this horrible, shitty feeling, and you say maybe you need to make a promise to God or whatever. You say, I'm going to offset this, or I'm going to live this down. But that's not what he said. So.
Yeah. I don't know. It just doesn't work for me. I mean, this is one of these rare moments where I'm just like, Steve, I just don't think you constructed something very good here. I understand the intent of it. I understand what he was trying to go for. I just don't think he pulls it off.
Yeah.
I want to talk about this as well, because as their conversation wraps up, Leia says, from the eyes down that she's ugly now. And this part of this is like her face is going to have this horrible scar on it because she just sliced her fucking mouth open. And he tries to comfort her on that. And he says, I walked her to the door. In the 8th grade, we studied haiku in English class, and one of them came back to me then. Very gently, I touched one finger to her scabbed mouth. When there is love, scars are as pretty as dimples. I love you, Leia. She touched my lips as I had touched hers. I love you too. Matt, he said the thing.
You said the thing from the other thing.
From the other one. That's for those that don't remember or possibly didn't listen to us cover that book. That is a line from 11/22/63 that oh gosh, what is the main character's name in that book? I just totally blanked on it. Jake, thank you. That is the thing that Jake says to Sadie, who has a scar on her face because of a horrible event.
So I can't think of any off the top of my head, really, but do you think there are any other connections to be made with Sadie, between Sadie and Queen?
I don't think so, other than the fact that this is a love that can never be. I mean, Jake and Sadie are destined to not be together, and Charlie and his mama are destined to not be together.
Yeah. They're cool hero characters, I guess. I
don't think there's anything deeper than that.
Yeah.
All right, but Charlie has to leave Matt. He doesn't belong here, and as the parts of Prince Charlie continue to depart from him, that becomes more and more evident. And as the chapter comes to a close, Charlie prepares to depart Empus, and we learn that he's gotten a gift of like a giant golden door knocker from Claudia and Woody, and also Jaya comes in and gives him a gift as well. A bone, if you know what I mean. Charlie gets laid. Charlie gets laid at the end of this book, just randomly. It's just like so casually. I love that she just walks in and is like, hey, before you go, do you want to? And he's like, yes, I would quite like that. Thank you.
Yes. How nice of you to offer. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it makes sense as fully transitioning to adulthood type of metaphor, right?
Do you think this entire book was a metaphor for losing your virginity? I mean, don't we all kind of have to go deep down into our dark well before we...
Yes, obviously.
Okay, let's move on.
Uh-huh.
All right, Claudia and Woody come to see Charlie before he leaves, and Charlie picks this moment, Matt, to fucking lambast them for choosing to do nothing for years while Empus collapsed all around them. You know, Matt, this is a thing that I was kind of trying to think about for a while, because we had a listener point out to us that Leia and Woody and Claudia do kind of perfectly represent this idea of speak no evil, see no evil, hear no evil, respectively. And I noticed this too, but I didn't bring it up at the time because, first of all, they weren't the only three. We had learned of other surviving royals that had different senses lost. And I was like, oh, we're doing things with all the senses, so it's not specific to these. But it became clear to me that these three were like the primary characters of the story. And so that idea of the speak no evil, see no evil, hear no evil thing, like just became more and more resonant. But I still wasn't sure what to do with that general idea. And it wasn't until this moment where I went like, oh, okay, this is it, right? That these are three characters who chose to do nothing, who chose not to see the evil, who chose not to hear the evil, who chose not to speak the name of the evil that exists in this world, and instead chose to kind of hide out and do nothing.
Yeah, exactly. They took a passive role out of their inability to acknowledge evil and their role in it. And that's why I almost think that like this curse was, I know I'm probably contradicting the text. I don't actually remember, but it's like maybe the land itself cursed them for failing to do their duty, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the book kind of says it was Eldon, but like it's an assumption, right? Like that there's nothing, like, I mean, it is really interesting that like the curse that's on the land of Empus is like all of the normal people are gonna turn gray and ugly because they called me like gray face or something. But my royal family, the surviving ones of them, they're going to lose 1 cent. It seems like very specifically weird to the point where like I'm just going to headcanon it with you're right. This is like not something that was specifically part of Flight Killer and Gog Magog. It was just a result of the world, the magic of the world punishing them for their mistakes.
Yeah. I like this theory, but
yeah, I do too. I do too. I love this though. As he's kind of yelling at them, Claudia responds, "No, Charlie, you were the one she needed. You were the promised prince, and now that promise has been fulfilled. What you say is true. We were weak. We lost our courage. But please don't leave us in anger. Please. Did I know before that a person can choose not to be angry? I don't think I did. What I knew was that I didn't want to leave that way either." And like I think this goes back to what we were talking about, right? With Charlie and his father. Like this idea of learning that you can choose not to be angry, that anger is an emotion that you can control, that you can choose to forgive a person, that you can choose to let something go is something that we all have to figure out eventually. And this is part of this is, as you said, on the hero's journey, this is the thing that Charlie brings back with him. This is the balm, the salve, the healing thing of the relationship is you can look at someone and say, you did something horrible to me. You failed me and I'm angry with you about it. And I can just choose to not do that anymore. And or I can, or rather even like not choose, not do that, but choose something else more. Like Charlie doesn't necessarily say I'm just going to not be angry anymore. It's like it's more important to me that I be happy with you when I leave than it is that I be angry with you right in this minute. And that's a very adult thing, right? And that's something that even adults struggle with. Like I'm not saying like once you turn into adult you never get angry with people anymore. No, of course not. But I mean, I think anyone that's been in a relationship has probably experienced a moment where you can say like I can be angry right now and I can make this suck for me and for my spouse or my partner, or I can just choose to not do that, to realize it's not worth it. And I think that matters a whole lot.
Yeah, right.
All right. So finally, it comes time for Charlie to leave Lilimar, and we get this. In her hands, Leia held a garland of blood-red poppies, the only flowers that had continued to grow during the gray years. And it did not surprise me, nor will it you, I think, to know that the people of Empus called these flowers Red Hope. Queen Leia kissed me, and although her mouth was broken, that was the best kiss I've ever had, at least since my mother died. She's his mom, Matt.
Yeah.
She's his mom.
Now, I feel really dumb because I actually didn't make that connection until you pointed it out, and it's so rife throughout this that he clearly sees her as a maternal figure more than a romantic figure, even though she's like beautiful, and he can't help but realize she's beautiful. But yeah, she's a maternal figure. She's a queenly figure. He's the prince. She's the queen.
Yep.
Right. She's not the princess. She's the queen.
Correct. All right. So we move on to chapter 32, our final non-epilogue chapter of the book, titled Here's Your Happy Ending. So Matt, this is an interesting thing that happened. So by this point, I think I was still, maybe I was starting to doubt a little bit, but I was still kind of expecting Charlie to return home and find that his dad had died. But what happens is you turn the page in the book and you're greeted with this. The picture that is aligned with this chapter is one of Charlie hugging his father.
Yep.
Now, obviously, this isn't a spoiler. Like the book didn't spoil itself. This is how it was designed to be, right? Like the choices were made in the publishing of this book that we were going to see this picture going into this chapter and know this is going to happen. But it does kind of strike me as funny that you, as an audiobook reader, did not get this picture as you turned the page to this chapter. And so you probably had a very different experience going into this chapter than I did, where I saw this and immediately went like, oh, he's not dead. Okay, I can let all the tension and concern for that go and just read how this is going to play out. You, on the other hand, probably carried that tension up until you see his father.
I did, and I still, even after seeing him, thought there was a chance that it's like, but then he got sick or something, and died later. Sure. But no, that doesn't really seem to happen either. So
no. I want to read this a little bit. it says, "We ate stew. Then we went outside to watch the vast wedding band of gold in the sky that had been Bella and Arabella. It was very beautiful, as broken things sometimes are. I wondered again just where this world was, and I decided it didn't matter. That it was enough." There you go, Matt. Is it Middle Earth? There's your answer. Or not Middle Earth. Sorry. Midworld.
Yeah. Narnia.
Too much fucking Tolkien on the brain.
It doesn't matter is the answer. So it's Midworld, in other words. Yeah.
No, that's not what he says.
Oh, okay.
With that, Charlie and Radar say goodbye to Dora and head home. They climb to the top of the well and into our world once again. After taking down the locked shed door with a sledgehammer, Charlie sees snow on the ground. And so we're greeted with the fact that time did pass in the real world. I do have to say, Matt, this part surprised me. I really did think rather, we were going to go with this no time has passed ending. I really didn't think time was going to have moved in the real world as significantly as it had.
Yeah, between the two possibilities of like no time has passed on the one end or like 100 years has passed on the other, like I think my least likely option was pretty much the same amount of time that Charlie perceived was what happened. I thought we'd established that there was like weird timey-wimey stuff with Impus, but I guess not. I guess I just misunderstood.
I mean, I think that weird timey-wimey stuff was we were looking at characters like Leia and saying, this is a woman who interacted with Adrian Bowditch years and years and years ago and still looks very young and beautiful. And the explanation there was just, these people age different than us, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. Good point.
So 4 months have passed as we learn, as Charlie sees a missing sign for himself posted to a telephone pole. And he also asks this random kid he sees what day it is, which, okay, tell me I'm wrong here. Hold up, kitty, which, by the way, the fact that he uses kitty is perfect. Yeah. He looked at me distrustful, but stopped. What day is it? The words came out smoothly enough, but they seemed to have corners. And my brain immediately went, why, it's Christmas Day, of course. And then Charlie says, the spirits did it all in one night.
Yeah.
I feel like this is intentionally constructed to echo Christmas Carol a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right.
Like just grabbing a random kid running through snow and saying, what day is it? Like that's always going to come off Christmas Carol-y to me.
Yeah.
So.
Why is Christmas Day? Yeah.
I did like the end of that where he says the words had corners because he's speaking English for the first time in a while. I really
what a great sentence.
Yeah. Charlie heads home, and let me tell you, Matt, I don't know if it was just because I had so convinced myself that his dad was going to be dead, but this moment, this is an extremely powerful moment. I shed a little bit of tears. I'm going to be honest. I did. At this moment right here. For a moment, he didn't seem to register who was standing in the doorway. When he did, shock loosened the muscles in his face. I'll never forget how that moment of recognition made him look both older, the man he would be in his 60s and 70s, and younger, like the kid he'd been at my age. It was as if some internal sundial turned both ways at once. Charlie? He started to stand up, but at first his legs wouldn't hold him, and he plumped back down again. Radar sat beside his chair, thumping her tail. Charlie, is it really you? It's me, Dad. Ugh.
Yeah. It's great. It's so great. There's something about, I mean, it's already a beautiful scene, but the fact that like Radar ran into the house first and is sitting next to him and he's like reacting to like, what the hell? This just a German Shepherd in my house. And then his son walks in. Like, this is one of the many, many scenes in this book that I feel like I could just see the way you would film this.
Yeah.
It's going to be good. It's going to be a good TV show.
I think so. I also want to say, like, I didn't think about this when I pulled this quote, but now the kind of argument I constructed on the fly as we were talking of this book being about Charlie learning to forgive his father, this idea that he looks at his dad in this moment and sees both the elderly version of himself, of his dad, and the younger kid version of his dad is, to me, like Charlie seeing his dad in a way he's never seen him before. Like it's not, he doesn't see him as he is now and as he will be and as he was. He specifically sees him as he will be and as he was. He specifically sees him as both a younger version of himself and an elderly version of himself, which are like the more vulnerable parts of a person. You know, like that part of growing up is learning that your parents are just people, and people that make mistakes. And like there's something that I'm experiencing right now as my parents continue to age, is like seeing your parents become old people is a really, really weird experience, because you see them, their weaknesses, you see them as their bodies age and stop working right, and you see the vulnerabilities that old age brings upon, and so you see them in a different light. And also him getting to see his father as a boy also allows him to see his father in the light of a young person that acts the same way Charlie did and makes mistakes and fucks up. And so getting to see these two versions of his dad simultaneously, I think gives him a perspective on his father that is, as you said, the thing that he brings back is a new perspective on his dad. And yes, it doesn't say, Dad, I forgive you for everything you did, but it's there. I think it's there.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully put. And it's funny. I think like when you're 17, it's not that your parents haven't aged, but basically for your whole life, when you're 17, your parents have basically been the same for your whole life.
Yeah.
Like maybe, maybe your dad went from whatever hair color to gray, but they're not, and maybe they slowed down a bit, but only a bit, right? The point I'm trying to make here is like, your perception of your parents at age 17 is really that they're just kind of eternally the same. And it's only when you get quite a bit older that you begin to realize, like, no, they're not this immortal elf creature that's always going to be there. They're changing. In fact, they've been changing the whole time, and it was just hard for me to notice because I was changing so fast relative to them.
Yeah.
I love what you said about seeing the young version and the old version, though. That's great.
It's really cool. But I do have something to ask you, because as this chapter ends, here's what we get. I think I know what you want, and now you have it. Here's your happy ending. And maybe I'm just like reading the emotion of that last sentence wrong, but it feels angry to me. Like it feels like, here you go, here's your fucking happy ending, you asshole. And I'm just like, I was like, why are you mad, Charlie? Because this does seem pretty happy, dude. And I think we get into a little bit of why this is in the epilogue, like why he's perhaps angry. But like we talked about in the very beginning of the show, I'm having a lot of trouble squaring the guy who said at the very beginning that like this was the good part and then everything went to shit, with the ending that we got, because it does seem like everything kind of works out. With the exception of the fact that he has to close himself off from Empist forever, which I understand the sadness there, especially when we talk about Leia is his mother. I get that. That's why we're sad, because she's your mother and you're basically having to say, that's my mom and I don't get to see her anymore. Which is because she died. Like, I get all that, but I just, am I off base here? That it's like, there's several moments. I wish I could get the direct quote where he says like, this is before everything turned awful. And I'm just like, what's awful here, Charlie? It seems like everything's going pretty good for you, actually.
Yeah, I agree that there's a weird dissonance to me where the beginning of the story has a lot of like, this story is going to be really hard for me to write. Mm-hmm. And you almost imagine like a beaten down by life older Charlie who's like taking shots of whiskey between chapters. Mm-hmm. and it's just not, that's just not it at all. Like he's a happy guy, still relatively young, still has a relationship with his father, still has the dog, lives what seems like a rewarding life. Yes, he has this scar on his arm. Yes, he had a traumatic experience that probably, gives him some, he lost friends, right? It's almost like he lived through a war, right? Yeah. Like but he doesn't say like, I wake up screaming, thinking about Iota every night or something like that. So I don't know. I don't know. I've a lot of words to say. I don't really know why exactly the book frames it this way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'll read kind of what some of the last lines of the book are here in the epilogue is I'm going to tell you the truth. Sealing that well under steel and 7 inches of concrete hurt my heart. Somewhere down below it is a world full of magic and people I loved, one person in particular. As the concrete flowed sluggishly out of the mixer I'd borrowed from Kramer to do the job, I kept thinking of Leia standing on the stairs, sword drawn, leg braced in a fighting stance, and how she cut open her sealed mouth to cry out her brother's name. I lied just now, okay? My heart didn't just hurt. It cried out no and no and no. It asked how I could leave wonder behind and turn my back on magic. It asked if I really meant to plug the funnel to the stars fall through. Plug the funnel the stars fell through. I did it because I had to. And okay, so this is another metaphor, I think, right? Like this is leaving behind magic, leaving behind wonder, leaving behind your mom. This is leaving behind childhood. This is one day you can't go to Narnia anymore because Narnia is for kids. Fairy tales are for kids. These stories are for kids. This world is for children, and you need to leave it behind, just like you need to leave your mother behind because she's gone, unfortunately. So like I guess this is essentially, Matt, like why he's so bitter about all this is because like it is a story of him learning to forgive his father. It's also a story of him learning to let his mother go, and knowing that there's right underneath his feet there's a magical world in which he could have his maternal figure, to have magic, have wonder, and just know that he can never experience these things. I get that. I get it. I still don't know if I marry that with how he describes it earlier in the novel, though.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I think I honestly want to go back and listen to some of our earlier episodes, to remember what I thought at different times, because I feel like maybe I didn't say this, but I feel like I saw Impus as a kind of escapism for Charlie and his mundane life. In which case, it's not healthy to escape into this world. Like yeah, it's a world of magic, it's a world of wonder. But what is that doing for you, like spiritually, to escape into a world of magic and wonder? Like you know that's not your real life. I don't know if this is coming together for me here, but it's like you had to go to Empus because you had to heal your relationship with your father, which is a very mundane problem. And having done that, like you're good. You completed the mission.
Yeah,
I feel like this is one of those conversations that's going to need to bleed over into our next whole book conversation.
Yeah, I think so, because I think I want to spend some time before that episode kind of rereading some of the early moments that really had convinced me that the ending of this book was going to be much less positive than it ends up finally being. So I think that's worthy of a revisit when we come back to the story next week. But yeah, this is the end of the book here. I do want to briefly talk about when he learns what happened to Christopher Polly, was that he was murdered and stabbed to death while homeless, living under an underpass. Specifically, what's called out here is both of his wrists are broken, so he was unable to defend himself against the stabs, which, Charlie takes personally.
Yeah, of course he does, because he has this overdeveloped conscience. but I'm like, look, this is a guy who literally tried to kill you.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yes, but like the second wrist break was unnecessary.
It was unnecessary. Okay, like it was a gunslinger move in the sense that it's like, if I don't incapacitate this guy, he's totally going to shoot me in the back as soon as he has an opportunity. So I need to put him down as much as possible without killing him. And yeah, the guy died because the guy sucked, and he probably robbed somebody else later. I didn't feel a single moment of conflict about this guy's death.
That's fair.
He's bad.
It's fair. I'm not saying I did. I just I understand. Were I in Charlie's shoes, I would probably feel the way he feels. Is what I'll say.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right, Matt. That is the end. The end of Fairy Tale. We've done it. It's the final book, the final episode. Sort of. We did it. We read another book.
Yeah. So many. Like stars falling into a funnel.
Oh my God. Are we just going to close that off? Are we just going to seal that well, Matt?
It's time for us to grow up, Scott.
No, we're just doing different. No. It's just a slightly different well.
Oh, okay. That's fine.
Yeah, as Matt said at the beginning of the show, next week will be our overview episode. So we are going to take one final look at Fairy Tale as a whole. We spend some time in the week between kind of revisiting sections of the book and reminding ourselves of what the overall picture of the story is. And then we have one final conversation about it at the forest level. So that'll be next week. Before we go, though, we do have answers for the final discussion question of Kingslingers. This is it, Matt. This is it.
That's right.
It turns out it was a question we had already asked before. So oops.
I mean, I think I knew that, but I think it was like, you know what? We'll give ourselves a treat.
Yeah, we did. And
that question was, what's your favorite Deus Ex Machina / Eucatastrophe from fiction? Okay, Row 2424 says, my favorite Deus Ex Machina, just to tick off Matt and Scott, I'm going to say The Return of the Monkey in the 2001 Tim Burton reboot of Planet of the Apes. It's just wild seeing this massive battle be interrupted by a regular monkey just showing up out of nowhere. Not only that, but all the apes start worshiping it, thinking it is Simos, the first ape. If this decision made you think this is a good movie, it's not. Still go watch it, though. It really is something to see. I take it that you've been keeping up with our Apesathon.
I hope so.
Ro. Yeah,
I hope so. Yeah, bad movie, but I think that's a valid part. It is pretty cool.
Just to remind people, we were watching all of the Planet of the Apes films in chronological order over on the Doofcast.
And we are wrapping it up this week with Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, the final film so far.
Yep.
Yeah. Pear Jane says, my answer last time was Grandpa's truck in The Lost Boys. Okay, so Pear Jane is specifically calling us out here by reminding us that we asked this question already. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jody. This time it's knowledge enhanced visual interconnectivity nexus Kevin from She-Hulk, who is a literal Deus Ex Machina. I didn't make it past episode 1 of She-Hulk, but I hear good things. So that's cool.
All right.
It's very funny. Kevin.
That's great. Maybe every one of the characters in this book that's named something like Jeff, maybe it's an acronym.
Oh yeah. Just, evil, fucking
fish stick.
Sure. Did you say fish dick or fish stick?
Fish stick.
Are you saying dick or stick?
Stick.
Are you sure? It sounds like you're saying fish dick.
Are you saying Pam?
Or panned.
Are you saying panned? Bliss Orb says, my favorite Deus Ex Machina is the Dandelo encounter in the Dark Tower because it pisses so many people off.
You mean when Stephen King literally calls himself a Deus Ex Machina? Yeah, no, that's perfect. I love it.
Yeah, me too.
Steve Living Room takes a different tactic and says, my least favorite Deus Ex Machina would have to be Patrick Danville showing up and ending up erasing the Crimson King. I accept all the weird, wild things from King in the series to Sneetches, but for some reason this just seems so off and thrown in. Plus, Patrick didn't even draw Susanna new legs. I think the drawing. I think I would actually despise the choice to at the very end of the novel just draw Susanna legs. I would hate that so much. Susanna not having legs is a core part of who she is as a person, and you can't just give that person new legs.
Imagine if you'd ended the book by them finding this reality warper and then him just like fixing everything perfectly.
Yeah.
And then he draws the Dark Tower and Roland goes into it and it's fine and the end. Yeah.
I mean, it's been a while, Matt. Like, how are you feeling years removed on the kind of very, very last minute Patrick Danville inclusion in the story.
It just never bothered me in the first place.
Yeah.
That's just a book where there's a lot of twists and turns and elements kind of popping up and fading away suddenly, which all feels very like mythic and like this world is sort of, it's just incredibly imaginative. Like that's the thing about the Dark Tower, is it's just this sieve for his enormously imaginative imagination to blast ideas through at a high rate. And I just, no part of me while reading the ends of those books was thinking like, it's a little too much there. Like that's just not, that's not how I was processing it. Anyway.
Yeah, that's fair.
Bent Westward says, my favorite Deus Ex Machina, the claw from the ending of Toy Story 3, literally the hand of God coming down to save our characters from one of the most depressing endings of all time. As a grown man, I was still traumatized by how they all resigned themselves to die, slowly being lowered on top of a pile of trash into an incinerator. I think this is why they made Toy Story 4, to cleanse the emotional palate.
Okay, Bent Westward, then why are they making Toy Story 5?
To cleanse the emotional palate.
No, I think it's to cleanse their new mansions.
Well, you got to cleanse the new mansions. It is funny how each Toy Story movie ends with a sort of catharsis of like, and then they had closure, but it's like, but not all the way, because there's still got to be some residual lack of closure to get closure on for the next movie.
But not all the way. Yes.
Yeah.
This is great. Frank Oda says, my favorite Deus Ex Machina is when Trashy blows up the entire city of Vegas in the stand, at least temporarily defeating Randall Flagg and ensuring the survival of Boulder. Yes, I think this is like the most literal Deus Ex Machina, as the literal hand of God comes down and ignites a nuclear weapon that saves the day.
Yeah, that's true. That is what that is. Yeah. Otherworlds 1999 says, favorite Deus Ex Machina is King riding himself into the Dark Tower. He is the god of that story, and then literally creates the moment when he sends Susanna the note. I know it's a controversial choice, but I was in love with its daring originality when I first read it, and I stand by it on each journey. We're revisiting this point a second time, but the thing is, he only does it the one time.
And he's like, I mean, in the way that King is doing this, he's like calling it out, which doesn't excuse it, but like when he calls it a Deus Ex Machina, when he like admits that it is indeed that, I think it just becomes funny.
Everything is made up in a story.
True.
Like that's true, but that's true whether or not the author steps in and reminds you, hey, I, Stephen King, am the one making this up. But but that's the point. It's this metatextual extravaganza. Like that, he's doing it on purpose is the point.
Yeah, I agree. All right. We have Aqualung Fish, who says, I'm going to be purposely vague in hopes that the Buffy podcast ever actually happens. I know, but I have to keep the dream alive. So the Deus Ex Machina I'm going with comes from the 6th season of Buffy. Towards the end of that season, Buffy is fighting the big bad and losing. The villain knocks her to the ground and then says that there's nothing in the world that can stop them. Then a magic blast from off screen knocks them to the ground. Camera pans, and there's a character who disappeared from the show early in the season. Their line, I'd like to test that theory. Coolest character return ever, completely out of nowhere, and saves the protagonist from losing horribly, so I think it counts. I like this. I do wonder, so obviously there is a huge difference between Eucatastrophe and Deus Ex Machina, which we've kind of failed to pinpoint because we just lumped this question together as like, just talk about both or either. I think these are inherently different things. I would think that this works specific to a catastrophic event because it is a established character suddenly and perfectly returning in time to save the day, which feels more catastrophic than Deus Ex Machina is kind of meant to be specifically like, I mean, it means God in the machine, right? It's like literally a God will come suddenly into your story and stop a thing from happening.
Yeah. I mean, I just to be nitpicking pedantic asshole for a second, like it's not. It is neither of those things. Just because something good has happened, like Han Solo coming back at the end of A New Hope, is neither of these things. It is a clearly set up story moment that resolves his character arc.
True. Yes.
But it happens to be good, but that doesn't make it a eucatastrophe, is what I'm saying here.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think this, I mean, you don't have the context of this, but I think this would be a eucatastrophe because this is a character returning and is part of their arc, but the character returning was not like a culmination of an arc or anything. It was just, hey, he's back.
Cool.
It was a really cool moment, though.
Awesome. All right. Duran Longbeard says, a lot of people do their least favorite, which is funny. My least favorite attempt at trying to make something a Deus Ex Machina is when people insist the Eagles could have just flown the ring to Mordor. They couldn't. The whole premise of the series is that Sauron is constantly looking for the ring, and a giant herd of flying eagles heading toward the Mount Doom will be a pretty noticeable thing. Aside from the fact that he had a horde of flying Nazgul and fell beasts, meaning they wouldn't have to contend with a very powerful Witch King, the Eagles generally did not see land problems on land as their problems. They would not be very inclined to risk themselves for a suicide mission to drop a trinket into a spewing volcano. A special note to the "why didn't Aragorn bring the army of the dead to fight at the Black Gate" sentiment. Yes, let's bring an army of dead people to fight a necromancer. Thank you.
I mean, yes, Duran, you are 100% correct on this, but you know what the best answer to someone's saying that, why couldn't the Eagles have just flown the ring to Mordor? You just say, shut up. and then you just don't engage with that person in conversation anymore because it's stupid. Yes, there are literal, like, world building reasons for why that couldn't have happened, but they're irrelevant because the real reason is because that's not the fucking story. The end.
Yeah.
All right. Our final answer this week comes from No Knowledge 84, who says, my favorite is when Kojak comes back twice. King doesn't always kill the dog. That's right. He didn't kill Kojak, and he didn't kill Radar. Our girl survived, Matt. I don't think we hit that beat enough in the episode this week. That Radar did not die. That I really convinced myself that Radar was going to die.
And Radar, who did not die, lived. See,
it's Christmas Carol. It's all Christmas Carol.
It is a Christmas Carol. I really want to think more about that for next time.
Yeah, that's a great answer though. Kojak from The Stand also survived and played a pivotal role in the events of that climax of that book.
Yep.
All right. Well, that is the end of our answers this week. I just want to point out, folks, we got a lot of answers for this one. A lot of y'all wrote novels for this answer. Holy shit. You wrote a lot. We were just, there's no way we were going to read that all out on a show. Yeah. But we read it. I read it.
We don't have an explicit word count limit on this, but have mercy.
I just want to say that I think when people write an answer that's an anime and then write a book about it, they're doing this to fuck with me intentionally. And I see you and I don't appreciate it. But thank you anyway. Thank you for sending those answers in. Thank you everyone for sent those answers in. For sent. I can't even talk anymore. For sending those answers in. The discussion question was always a very special part of this podcast. I really enjoyed it. It added so many things to Matt and I's watch list. And it is definitely something we will be continuing to do in Flanagan's Wake. We're not making that go away because we love it so much. So thank you for participating, everyone who did. It was really a pleasure.
Totally.
All right, Matt. Next week, as usual, the overview episode does not have a discussion question, but what it does have is a mailbag. It has the final mailbag of Kingslingers. We will never have a mailbag on the show ever again for as long as we both shall live. So this is it. This is your time. if you've had any questions you've ever had for either of us that you want to get answered before the show wraps up, now is the time. Send in those questions. We will answer them next week. In fact, I'm going to say, Matt, we're going to answer every single question you guys send in because it's the last one. Every question, every single one, we're going to answer it. No question is off limits.
Oh my God. All right.
This is the biggest mistake I've ever made. Here we go.
We didn't discuss this in advance, folks, but here we go.
It's said now. I can't edit it out. I can't do it.
It's true. She can't.
All right. That is it for us here this week on Kingslingers. As we said, next week is that final mailbag and our final episode covering Stephen King's fairy tale. It's our fairy tale overview episode. It's going to be a lot of fun. Please tune in.
Yeah, I remember you can reach us via email at kingslingerspod@gmail.com, over on Twitter at kingslingerspod, and of course on the subreddit at reddit.com/r/doofmedia. That's going to be the best place to submit those mailbag questions.
Yes, and also don't forget to get those voicemails in as well. You can submit those via the email that Matt just read and that telephone number, which is, once again, Matt, do you have it?
Yeah, I do have it. The telephone number is 719-357-5132.
All right. Thank you for that, Matt. And I scrolled up to read the number, and then I have to scroll back down because for some reason I don't have the script memorized yet, even though we've been doing this forever. Merch.
That's right.
doofmedia.myshopify.com. It's as the podcast comes to an end, it's a great time to memorialize your time with us by getting a coffee mug with our faces on it. we don't actually have that for sale, but we do have one with our logos on it, which, let's be honest here, look better than our faces.
Yeah. There's also propagating the time wave, which I enjoy the idea that maybe this is the first time you've heard the phrase propagating the time wave, but hopefully not the last. It's an amazing mug, amazing design. Thank you.
Amazing mug, amazing pillow, amazing shirt, amazing design. It's all good. It's very funny. And yes, we will find a way to use that phrase as often as possible.
Yes. If you like Kingslingers or any other shows on the Doof Podcasting Network, such as the Doofcast, which we still continue to do and will continue to do, and you want to support us, then please consider donating to our Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia.
And if you cannot afford to donate and join that community right now, that is absolutely okay. You can help us out by sharing this podcast. Even as we're coming to an end, it's never a bad time to introduce new people to the show. So please share the podcast and please continue to leave those rating and reviews. This week's spotlight review comes from Smith Joshua 2989, who says, taking this series straight to the brain. They give us 5 stars and say, I've been a longtime listener of 2 other King podcasts, The Losers Club and The Stephen King Cast, both very good podcasts. Great taste, and that I have absolutely loved. However, the rate at which I consume those episodes pales in comparison to how addicted I am to the guys on Kingslingers. There's something so friendly, inviting, calming, and often wholesome about Matt and Scott's discussions. I love how simply they compare their thoughts regarding the plot of all the stories they cover, how interesting their tangents are, and how I've caught myself actually responding, interjecting to their conversations out loud while listening. I've just started listening to them around July 2024. I had a major death in the family in that same month, and in August, my wife and I moved from Minnesota to Colorado. The hours of drive time and grieving time I've spent with these guys has kept me sane. Thanks, fellas. I'm almost caught up on all the episodes, and I was dumbfounded when I listened to their announcement about ending this project at the end of the current season. I'm just grateful that I'll get a chance to listen to the final episode of the series live. Well, that was very kind of you. So sorry to hear about your loss, but I'm very glad we could help in our little tiny way of just speaking stupidly into microphones.
Yeah, it always makes me happy. That's always what we're trying to do is help people, make people happy. That's the basic idea here.
For sure. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone who continues to send in those rating and reviews. And yeah, that's it for this episode. So we will be back next week for our overview episode of Fairy Tale. Still 2 episodes to go, folks. plenty of time for some more fun with Kingslingers. But we'll see you back here next week for the fairy tale overview episode. Long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.